or break them. That's because of this man, Robert Parker, and his newsletter, The Wine Advocate. For 3 decades, he dominated as the world's most influential wine critic. Now Parker's protege is building an empire of his own. Antonio Galloni runs Venice. Antonio, tell me, what are you trying to build at Venice?
Well, at Venice, we started with the idea in 2013 of building a world-class platform. We have a database of about 250,000 professionally written reviews. On Delectable, we have 7 million user reviews. Through Delectable, we also have a partnership with Whole Foods and several other partnerships that we can't announce just yet. And when you put that all together, what we have is something that no other company in our space can even come close to.
Do you think of yourself as the next Parker?
Not at all.
Why?
Because Steve Jobs said you can't live your life trying to be somebody else. So he's one of my biggest influences, and I've never wanted to be a replica of somebody else because a replica is never as good as the original. Bob is a genius, fantastic, one of a kind. We're going to be something completely different, and I have no desire to be some version of somebody else.
Different in what way?
Every decision that I've made at this company is completely anathemic to what Bob did with his company. I want our writers to be partners. All of my senior people are locked into the company. They all have equity or they have a path to equity based on business results. That's something that we never had at Parker. Our benefits are world-class, and everything that we've done at Venice is completely different from that model. When Steve Tanzer, who is the most experienced active wine critic in America, wants to work with us, that says something. When Alessandro Masnaghetti, who's the best cartographer of vineyards, wants to work with us, that says something. When Neil Martin, who's a superstar wine critic with enormous experience in Bordeaux and Burgundy and the former lead critic at The Advocate, wants to come and be part of our team, that says something.
You make it sound like The Wine Advocate was a disaster as a company and a miserable experience as an employee.
No, it was great because I got to work with Bob Parker when he was at his prime, you know, and Bob was like a second father to me, and we talked on the phone all the time, and he gave me great advice.
Can anyone's palate dominate the wine criticism business the way Parker?
I am placing a new order for euro to buy at 121.112. 112. Okay, order placed at 121.112. I'll remove in order to make sure that people who follow me will understand where this order was placed. Okay?
Version of somebody else. You see this in sports all the time. It's like, oh, well, nobody will ever beat this record. And then somebody comes along, you know, it was like tennis, Pete Sampras. Nobody's ever going to win as many Grand Slams. Now you have 2 guys who are ahead of that and one knocking on the door. And so I think a lot like that.
You're a former investment banker. How does that inform and influence what you're doing and what you've done?
My generation has had to deal with a lot more challenges. That's why I think we're actually much better poised for the future. My first job in finance, the first thing that happened was long-term capital, 1998. Then the tech bubble melted down. Then there was a mutual fund trading scandal. You know, that was all like within about 5 or 6 years. And these are the things that I had to deal with as a young executive. My peers who were 20 years older didn't know how to manage in crisis. They'd only seen Black Monday. They'd just been in a big bull market. It's very different. So I'm very lucky. People of my generation or a little bit younger have actually had to deal with a lot more crises. I think that's actually good for learning how to cope with challenges in business.
From the outside, it kind of looks like you're trying to demolish the house that Parker built, right? You left The Wine Advocate.
Yeah.
You merged with one of his chief rivals.
Yeah.
And you just hired his successor, Neil Martin.
Mm-hmm.
So are you?
I think what that says is that all the best people want to work at our company, and that's really what we strive to create starting in 2013. We wanted to create a world-class company that would attract the best-in-class talent, and not just on the content side, on the technology side, on the digital side, our office, and at every level, what we're trying to, we only hire superstars, and we're looking for those superstars.
In the world of professional wrestling, there's something called a swerve.
Hulk Hogan has betrayed WCW!
Some examples. These tag team partners are called babyfaces, or the good guys. Then one of them swerves when he super kicks his tag team partner in the head, quickly assuming the role of the bad guy, or what the wrestling world calls the heel.
Are you kidding? What a despicable act that was!
Or a match is almost lost when, what's that? The superstar wrestler appears out of nowhere sprinting down the aisle to save the match.
That's the Warrior's music! It's the Ultimate Warrior!
That's a swerve. So it should go as no surprise that World Wrestling Entertainment, known as the WWE, the most popular brand of sports entertainment in the world, is prepared for any swerves that come their way. So here's the story of how the WWE learned to see the swerve coming. So I spoke to Bloomberg reporters Felix Gillette
I'm a writer for Bloomberg News for the global business team.
and Kim Basine
And I'm the U.S. luxury reporter at Bloomberg.
to find out exactly how the WWE is positioning itself for an all-out global invasion, which starts with a massive change to their lucrative pay-per-view model.
WWE basically pioneered the pay-per-view model on cable. I remember as a kid, when the pay-per-view events came up, all of our friends would scramble around and try and get one of the parents to pay for it.
But in 2014, they took a huge risk.
They saw a little bit sooner than some of the other entertainment brands that where this whole thing was moving was away from cable and satellite television and towards on-demand streaming video apps. They made this risky decision, in essence, cannibalizing that pay-per-view model, which they had essentially built.
And after some early turbulence, it's working. Roughly 1.5 million people are paying $9.99 a month for the WWE app, making it the 5th most popular streaming OTT service. This adapt-or-die approach is in the WWE's DNA. Over the past 30 years, the company always seems to think 2 steps ahead. In the early 90s,
WWE was at its most threatened when Ted Turner took them on with WCW.
which stands for World Championship Wrestling. And back then, the WCW was winning the ratings war. So in order to compete with them,
WWE had changed its product from a family-friendly kind of cartoonish style to this really raw. That's why they called their show Raw. It was this raw style of wrestling.
with violent, outrageous, reality-inspired plot lines and aggressive personas.
From a 16-foot ladder!
And they won that fight against Ted Turner. And they bought WCW.
The early 2000s ushered in an era of testosterone-driven programming aimed at the red-blooded American male.
Bra and panties matches, and people smash each other over their head with like barbed wire bats and things like that.
Until 2015, when WWE fans started a hashtag #GiveDivas a Chance. Since then, WWE has hired 40 more female wrestlers, and that growing cast of female characters was part of a much larger plan.
They started to try to appeal to a broader set of people.
Let's attract more female fans. And after we've attracted more female fans, let's attract more international fans. They're broadening their base, and they're doing that in large part to make it more advertising friendly.
And not just friendly to advertisers.
They're trying to build up their fan base in China. They're trying to build up their fan base in Europe. They, already have a pretty good fan base in India.
India is a place where they already have an established wrestling culture.
Because of the gigantic Indian wrestler, the Great Khali. But there's still a lot of work to do. While the WWE set a revenue record in 2017, only 30% of it is coming from an overseas audience. And there's one person whose responsibility is to grow that number.
The buck eventually stops at Vince McMahon, no matter what's happening within WWE.
Yeah, he's a very controlling guy, and it's a very, very, very tightly scripted company.
And that goes all the way down the board to big stars' entrance music and their outfits and things like that.
So with a CEO like McMahon always planning 2 moves ahead and an aggressive push into multiple international markets, a big issue is money.
It's hard to do all those things simultaneously without committing a huge amount of capital to it.
And that's where the WWE becomes an attractive company for buyers.
Potentially, one thing that could happen with WWE is they could benefit by being acquired by a bigger technology or telecom company, an Amazon or Facebook or a 21st Century Fox.
So with a market cap of $2.8 billion, the advantage of owning 100% of their own content, and a rapid consolidation spreading throughout the entertainment industry, it looks like the WWE is well positioned, even if there are swerves.
Our world is changing. Every day, it changes a little faster. Some changes are too small to see. Others, too big to handle. Sometimes, change feels slow. So slow, we don't even notice. Other times, it happens all at once, and we can't keep up. For our climate, change means many things. And between too small to see and too big to handle, there is a whole world of difference. The clock is ticking. This is Bloomberg Green.
Saving the seas. This week, the deep-sea diver who stopped writing the ocean's obituary to find a solution. Enric Sala tells us why the next 10 years matter most. And globalization needs to get greener. Shipping accounts for nearly an eighth of all transport emissions. How can the industry clean up its act? Plus, protecting coastlines comes at a huge environmental cost. But one Israeli startup found a way to keep the sea out and the animals in. From London, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern, and this is Bloomberg Green. After more than a decade of studying the ocean as an academic, Enric Sala realized he was writing the ocean's obituary. He quit his job and became a full-time conservationist. As an in-house explorer for National Geographic, he's clocked more than 5,000 open water dives. He's also founded Pristine Seas, a project that combines exploration, research, and media to lobby countries to protect their oceans. To date, it has helped create marine reserves equivalent to half the size of Canada. I spoke to him about his mission and why it's so urgent.
The state of the world's oceans is really bad. We have lost 90% of the large fish in the ocean. Sharks, groupers, cod, tuna. More than half of the fish stocks are overfished, which means that we are taking them out of the water faster than they can reproduce. More than half of the ocean is affected by industrial fishing, and global warming is killing coral reefs all around the world. The ocean is in a trajectory of decline.
Can you just visualize for our viewers who never get to see the kind of things you are able to see, what an ocean and healthy ecosystem looks like versus one that's next to a bustling economic and industrialized area?
Coral reefs in the United States, in the Florida Keys, are down to only 2% of what they used to be. Before, 80 to 90% of the bottom on a coral reef in the Caribbean was covered by live coral. Now, Florida Keys have only 2%. The average in the Caribbean is about 5% of the bottom covered by live coral. The rest is covered by slime and seaweed. And most of the fish you can see are this big. And it is very, very rare that if you jump into any place in the Caribbean at random, you see a shark. It's very, very rare. Now, let's go to Millennium Atoll, for example, an atoll that is uninhabited and fished south of the equator in the Central Pacific, belongs to the Republic of Kiribati. In 2009, we conducted the first underwater expedition to this island, and I still remember the first time. Jumped over the side of the boat, and as soon as the bubbles cleared, I was surrounded by 15 gray reef sharks. After a couple minutes, the sharks decided that we were boring, and they went back to do their thing. And you look down, 90% of the seafloor is covered by thriving coral, and it's full of fish, and a sea turtle comes by. Now, this abundance that we rarely see anywhere except in well-managed marine reserves. This is what the ocean used to be like, and this is what we have learned from going to these pristine places.
And you write in your book that you're writing the obituary of ocean life. What's the cure?
The cure is doing less harm. Basically, there are three things that we are doing to the ocean. One is we are taking fish out of the water faster than they can reproduce. Two, we are turning the ocean warmer and more acidic because of man-made climate change. And three, we are throwing in everything that we don't want, our waste and our plastic. We need basically to reverse these trends.
Does this mean that a lot of this falls to governments and their policies?
That's a big part of it, because it is governments that regulate fishing and mineral extraction and oil extraction. It is governments that have the legal authority to create large marine reserves in the ocean. But also, local communities have an important role to play because some of the most successful protected areas in the ocean are community-led and community-managed marine reserves.
New position opened on euro at 121.10, yeah? Okay.
Interest in having as many fish as possible inside them so they can enjoy the benefits.
What from the pandemic has changed your view when it comes to protection of the environment?
Nature has given us a very strong signal of how fast it can recover if we just give it space. Everybody was fascinated by all these videos of the whales and the dolphins coming into marinas and mountain lions on the streets of Santiago in Chile, wild goats in the UK. Nature has this extraordinary ability to bounce back if we just give it space. This is why we need to protect at least 30% of the planet by 2030.
How do healthy marine ecosystems help in the fight against climate change, though?
Most people see the ocean as a victim of climate change, but the ocean can also be a solution because we know that the more life that is in the ocean, like big fish and big whales, the more these organisms help to make the ocean productive and absorb more CO2. The kelp forest, seagrass beds, all of these are important ecosystems in the ocean that are similar to the forest on the land that capture a lot of our carbon pollutions.
What are you most excited about in your field?
We have 10 years to fix this problem. Global fisheries catch is going down, stocks are collapsing. Business as usual means that by 2050, 90% of the coral reefs are gone, that most commercial fisheries have collapsed. That affects food security, that affects migration of people. We have 10 years to get to peak greenhouse gas emissions and then go carbon neutral by 2050. And we have 10 years to protect at least 30% of the ocean so we can restore much of this health and productivity, not just for saving biodiversity, but also saving our life support system. We are not talking about something that is apart from us. We are not apart from nature. We are a part of nature. So these 10 years are probably the most critical in the history of humanity.
The most accurate measurements of changing oceans will come from space. While Enric Sala explores what lies beneath, a new satellite is giving us data from above.
We'll learn more about our oceans and climate change, but from space. A new satellite's been launched from California. Its mission, track the accelerating rise of sea levels.
Well, the main instruments on board include a dual-frequency radar altimeter. And this is the primary instrument of the mission, and that's the one that's measuring sea surface height, significant wave height, and wind speed over the ocean. And from those measurements, we can actually have the superb measurements that we expect of sea level rise.
Data gathered from Sentinel-6 will be used alongside information from other satellites to build as complete a picture of the oceans as possible.
With a long record, we can precisely measure the acceleration. We eventually can detect new regime, tipping points. For example, if there is a runaway in the melting of Greenland or Antarctica, sea level will record this runaway change because it is an integrator of all changes that are occurring in the climate system. So we will be able to see some change, big change in the global climate.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration expects that sea level rise will increasingly threaten U.S. coastlines. One example, the southern tip of Manhattan is expected to flood 20 to 40 times a year by 2030.
11 of the 15 largest megacities are located at the coast, and this number will double. The number of people living in coastal area will double by 2060. So, knowing how much sea level is rising at the coast and how much it will rise in the future in coastal areas is as obvious. It's obviously a major goal for human beings.
Coming up, from sails to steam to oil, the shipping industry is no stranger to change. But how will it navigate the next transition? This is Bloomberg Green. From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern. This is Bloomberg Green. Now, for your roundup of this week's latest climate news, Jennifer Zabazaja has your Green in Brief.
Here's the climate news you need to know. Deforestation of the world's largest rainforest has hit a 12-year high. More than 4,000 square miles of the Amazon rainforest was destroyed in 2020. That's a 9.5% increase from a year earlier. Government data shows that destruction has soared since President Jair Bolsonaro took office and weakened environmental enforcement. The Amazon is home to millions of species and plants and is critical in the fight against climate change. Bitcoin is hitting all-time highs, but at what cost to the environment? The cryptocurrency is energy intensive, and there are concerns if it becomes mainstream. According to MIT, back in 2018, Bitcoin's carbon footprint was almost as big as Portugal's. Want to get better at tackling climate change? We'll hire more women. That's according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance. Firms with 30% or more women in top jobs tend to perform better when it comes to the environment and are more likely to set clear climate goals. Shopping online is more popular than ever now, but the price of convenience is measured in CO2, and more deliveries means more fuel burned and more packaging wasted. So what can companies do? Well, many are becoming more efficient and sourcing more clean energy for their data centers and warehouses. And England's farmers will be paid to go green after Brexit. As European subsidies are phased out, they'll get new money to encourage them to produce healthy, sustainable food. Poor farming practices are one of the leading drivers of water pollution and the loss of biodiversity. I'm Jennifer Zabazaja in New York. Anne-Marie, back to you.
The shipping industry is more than just the grease on the wheels of globalization. It's its chief enabler. 11 billion tons of goods are transported by ship each year, the biggest contributors being 2 billion tons of oil, 1 billion tons of iron ore, and 350 million tons of grain. According to the International Chamber of Shipping, 80% of Europe's imports and exports happen over the seas. And for such a vast industry, it also contributes its fair share of emissions. Shipping makes up 12% of global transport energy consumption. So how does it clean up its act? Earlier, I caught up with Bloomberg Green reporter Laura Milan about just how big of a challenge this is going to be for the industry.
One of the main issues is size. So about 90% of the world's cargo is moved by ships. So obviously changing such a huge industry is not going to be fast and it's not going to be easy. The second issue has to do with technology. So ships obviously travel for many days at sea. It's not as easy for them to refuel as it would be for a car, for example, going on a road. And the sector still hasn't found a technology that's economically viable and that's zero emissions and equivalent to the electric batteries for cars, for example.
But actions are being put in place to make the industry a bit more environmentally friendly. Walk us through those steps that they're taking.
That's it. So there's a first step that would involve using low emission fuels or biofuels that would significantly reduce the existing emissions. And then at a regulatory level, when it comes to the policy and the governments, there are steps being made as well. I would say that the most significant ones come from the European Union, which started to track emissions a few years ago and is now looking to include shipping emissions in the emissions trading system. So that would significantly reduce and help calculate the emissions from the shipping industry. Now, China is taking similar steps. So at the moment, regions need to report shipping emissions to the central government. And finally, we have the International Maritime Organization with a pledge to reduce shipping emissions by 50% in 2050. Now, we must say that that pledge has been considered insufficient by environmental groups, but at least some steps are being taken.
So to get to 2050, the industry obviously is going to need to start tapping some new technologies. What new technologies are you seeing being introduced into the shipping industry?
So we have seen pilot technologies being developed for years now, but what's interesting about this current moment is that we're seeing big players invest in these technologies that are not yet economically viable, but that one day might be. So for example, we are seeing earlier this year, the world's largest agricultural commodities trader, Cargill, saying they will invest in attaching sails to their ships so they can make any technology that they run their ships on more efficient. Similarly, we have seen a spin-off of Airbus, the aeronautics company, developing a similar application with kites. We have been following also developments in hydrogen. So at the moment, hydrogen fuel seems like a good option, a possible option when it has been developed and when it becomes economically viable. And we have Vestas, for example, the world's largest turbine maker, developing some ships that will be able to run on hydrogen in the near future.
Coming up, rising sea levels means humans need to get creative when it comes to coastal defenses. But how do we protect both ourselves and the environment? One Israeli startup may have the answer. That's coming up next. This is Bloomberg Green. In London, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern. This is Bloomberg Green. After water, what's the resource that humans use the most? It's concrete, 3 tons a year for every person on the planet. And engineers estimate it's used twice as much as all other building materials combined. And it comes with a huge environmental cost. Concrete, not just in cities, it's a common feature on our coastlines too. And that's taking a toll on biodiversity. But one Israeli startup has found a way of making sea defenses stronger and encouraging life to thrive.
If you take a look at concrete structures like breakwaters or seawalls, the water around them is often clear. That's not actually a good thing, because it means there's no life. Marine species are actually most abundant in coastal areas, but it's also where us humans prefer to live too. So when we build here, we drive away marine life.
The concrete in the marine world has a lot of additives, a lot of chemicals, and some of those materials are actually leaching out, and they're actually prohibiting marine life to thrive. If we keep developing without any regards to natural communities, there is a tilting point from which beyond we cannot really go back.
In the coastal city of Tel Aviv, an Israeli startup wants to revolutionize our urban coastlines. Their sea defenses are transforming lifeless man-made structures into teeming ecosystems. They do this by replacing standard concrete with their own special cement formulas.
As opposed to regular cement-based concrete, e-concrete includes certain elements that enhance the growth of marine flora and fauna of plants and animals. Our admix, which is kind of our secret sauce, is basically kind of sealing the concrete, making it less aggressive for the marine environment. That once we add it, we enable life to flourish.
In the lab, the team run tests to identify what mixes will work best for marine life.
So we take really ice cube size concrete slabs of different compositions, and we put larvae, 20, 30, 50. We need to have a lot of replicates. We're geeky scientists, so we have to have a lot of replication and controls. And then within a few days or just a few weeks, we can get an answer on their preference. So obviously if they die, they have a very low tolerance to that specific concrete mix design. And if they thrive or they flourish, we can quantify that very quickly.
E-concrete says it typically sees double the biodiversity of regular grey concrete. From fish and sea caterpillars on their armour blocks to crabs on these tidal pools that sit on the shoreline.
This unit holds water during the low tide, so it's always moist, and therefore it has a very comfortable habitat for crabs and sea anemones and sea stars, etc. These pools have been here for less than 3 months, and this is already what you can see. It's covered with life. See the rock around it, which has been here for probably 10, 20, maybe even more years, only has a thin layer of green algae, and that's it.
As well as the composition of the cement mix, e-concrete designs its products specifically to the marine environment it will be deployed, to create niches for endangered species, or to develop nurseries like these oyster beds. The final part of the equation is creating complex surface textures to mimic natural rock or coral, an environment that helps anchor young organisms.
When concrete elements are being cast, the typical goal is to have a very slick surface, very, very smooth. The idea is to get the water to flow right across it. When we're designing e-concrete with a rough surface, we want to do the complete opposite. We want to slow the water when they are crossing the structure so that the larvae can actually adhere and attach to the surface.
E-concrete has to offer its clients more than just ecological credentials. Over time, they've discovered that creating hospitable habitats for marine life adds another advantage, one that is surely hard to ignore.
We've seen evidence to the fact that the growth of the organisms on the concrete create kind of a layer of defense. Just the addition of weight, we can actually gain stability and strength over time.
This is let's say the unit when we put it in the water. And this is after a year in the water. And what you can see here is all the oysters are completely covering it. We designed the units so they can withstand the forces and perform in terms of structural performance, but they can also be a backbone for ecological enhancement.
The company tests its miniature designs in tanks full of real seawater, rocks, plants, and animal life from around the world.
What we're looking for is the accumulation of calcium carbonate on the surface of the concrete of different mixes and different designs. This is the process that we call biogenic buildup. So with time, we get a buildup of calcium carbonate that is sourced from marine organisms on the surface of the concrete. And we actually encapsulate the concrete with a natural rock. So when the organism dies, in the case of a coral, it will die, and then another coral will sit on it, and that's how a reef is growing.
The hope that our man-made structures could become stronger over time also means better economics. The units require less maintenance and could therefore stay in the water for longer. E-concrete, though, is just a few years old, so it needs more time to really quantify the longevity of its products. But the company are certain their products are better for the environment, and not just in terms of improving biodiversity.
We're kind of trying to offset some of that immense carbon footprint of the concrete industry.
Construction is responsible for about 11% of global carbon emissions. By adding a biological crust to their products, e-concrete prevents some CO2 from being released into the atmosphere.
For every kilogram of calcium carbonate being created by those marine organisms, we're offsetting 120 grams of CO2. So think about building a port infrastructure or a city waterfront that is an active carbon sink. I think that's a great advantage of the technology.
That does it for this week, but let's keep the conversation going on Twitter. Follow us at Climate. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern, and this is Bloomberg Green.
to repeal the entirety of the Affordable Care Act when we need it most. A law that's on the front lines against the pandemic. Protects more than 100 million Americans who live with pre-existing conditions, which will increase now, including those with lung scarring and heart damage as a consequence of COVID-19. It provides coverage for more than 20 million Americans who get the care they need if they're showing symptoms of COVID-19. The law that fulfills our moral obligation here in America. Healthcare is a right for all, not a privilege for a few. But as all of you know, I know that out of our collective pain, we're going to find a collective purpose to control the pandemic, to save lives, and to heal as a nation. Today, I'm pleased to announce a team that is going to do just that. It's a team of world-class experts at the top of their fields, crisis tested, defined by a deep sense of duty, honor, and patriotism. They're already ready to jump in. They've been advising me, many of them, for a long time. And they're going to be ready on day one to spare not a single effort to get this pandemic under control so we can get back to work, get back to our lives, get back to our loved ones. They'll lead the COVID-19 response across the government to accelerate testing, fix our supply chain, and distribute the vaccine. They'll work with my economic team because controlling the pandemic, delivering better health care, and reviving the economy go hand in hand. They'll work with my foreign policy and national security teams because we can't only beat the virus here at home, it must be beaten everywhere or it comes back to haunt us again. Today, I'm announcing that in consultation with Dr. Tony Fauci, we developed the first 3 objectives of the new initiative that I'm asking this team to complete once I'm sworn in our first 100 days in office. My first 100 days won't end the COVID-19 virus. I can't promise that. But we did not get into this mess quickly. We're not going to get out of it quickly. It's going to take some time. But I'm absolutely convinced that in 100 days we can change the course of the disease and change life in America for the better. First, my first 100 days is going to require, I'm going to ask for a masking plan. Everyone for the first 100 days of my administration to wear a mask. It will start with my signing an order on day 1 to require masks where I can under the law, like federal buildings, interstate travel on planes, trains, and buses. I'll also be working with the governors and mayors to do the same in their states and their cities. We're going to require masks wherever possible. But this goes beyond government action. And so, as a new president, I'm going to speak directly to the American people and say what I'm saying now. We need your help. Wear a mask for just 100 days. It's the easiest thing you can do to reduce COVID cases, hospitalizations, and death. Help yourself, your family, and your community. Whatever your politics or point of view, mask up for 100 days once we take office. 100 days to make a difference. It's not a political statement, it's a patriotic act. It won't be the end of our efforts, but it's a necessary and easy beginning, an easy start. Secondly, this team will help get at the last 100 million COVID-19 vaccine, at least 100 million COVID vaccine shots into the arms of the American people in the first 100 days. 100 million shots in the first 100 days. And we'll follow the guidance of science to get the vaccines to those most at risk. That includes healthcare professionals, people in long-term care, and as soon as possible, it will include educators. This will be the most efficient mass vaccination plan in U.S. history. I credit everyone who's has gotten us up to this point. But developing a vaccine is only one Herculean task. Distributing it is another Herculean task. You know, and vaccines in a vial only work if they're injected into an arm of people, especially those most at risk. This will be one of the hardest and most costly operational challenges in our nation's history. We're going to need Congress to fully fund vaccine distribution to all corners of the country, to everyone. I'm encouraged by the bipartisan efforts in Congress around a $900 billion economic relief package, which I've said is critical. But this package is only a start for more action early next year. We must also focus significant resources on direct public health response to COVID-19. Our preliminary view of Trump administration's vaccine distribution plans confirms media reports. Without urgent action by this Congress this month to put sufficient resources into vaccine distribution and manufacturing, which the bipartisan group is working on, there's a real chance that after an early round of vaccinations, the effort will slow and stall. Let me repeat, we need Congress to finish the bipartisan work underway now, where millions of Americans may wait months longer to get the vaccine. Months longer than they otherwise would have to wait to get the vaccination. Look, and then we're going to need additional action next year to fund the rest of the distribution efforts. We'll also need the Trump administration to act now, though, to purchase the doses it has negotiated with Pfizer and Moderna, and to work swiftly to scale manufacturing to U.S. populations and the world. This can be fixed. If it is fixed, my team will be able to get at least 100 million vaccinations done in my first 100 days. The third thing I'm going to ask in the 100 days It should be a national priority to get our kids back into school and keep them in school. If Congress provides the funding we need to protect students, educators, and staff, if states and cities put strong public health measures in place that we all follow.
All right, so you've been listening to President-elect Joe Biden in Delaware speaking about and getting ready to announce members of his health team. This is Carol Massar along with Tim Stenovic of Bloomberg Quick Take. We do want to take you to the White House, to the South Court Auditorium, where President Trump is speaking from the Operation Warp Speed Summit. Let's take you there.
From the instant the coronavirus invaded our shores, we raced into action to develop a safe and effective vaccine at breakneck speed. It would normally take 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, or even more. In order to achieve this goal, we harnessed the full power of government, the genius of American scientists, and the might of American industry to save millions and millions of lives all over the world. We're just days away from authorization from the FDA, and we're pushing them hard, at which point we will immediately begin mass distribution. Before Operation Warp Speed, the typical time frame for development and approval, as you know, could be infinity. And we were very, very happy that we were able to get things done at a level that nobody has ever seen before. The gold standard vaccine has been done in less than 9 months. On behalf of the entire nation, I want to thank everyone here today who has been involved in this extraordinary American initiative. I also want to recognize members of my administration who have worked tirelessly in this effort. Alex Azar, please, Alex. Where's Alex? Thank you, Alex. Great job. Monsef Slawi, where are you, Monsef? Thank you very much. Great job. A man who's now going to be very important, General Gus Perna. I have no doubt about it, right? Logistics. Jared Kushner's worked so hard. Where's Jared? Jared, wherever you may be. Thank you, Jared. Dr. Deborah Birx. Deborah? Thank you very much, Deborah. Admiral Brett Guar. Where is Brett? Great job you've been doing, Brett. Surgeon General Jerome Adams. Jerome, thank you very much. Terrific. Dr. Robert Redfield. Robert, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Administrator Seema Verma. Seema, thank you. Dr. Peter Marks. Peter? Where's Peter? Thank you. Paul Mango, Adam Bowler, and Brad Smith. Thank you very much. Great job. Thank you all very much. Incredible job. And many others also. Many, many others. We're also grateful to be joined by Governors Greg Abbott. Where's Greg? Bill Lee. Bill? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Ron DeSantis. Ron. Thank you, Ron. Thank you. Thank you very much. Great job, Ron. And John Bell Edwards. John Bell. Thank you. Thank you, John Bell. Thank you very much. As well as Senator John Barrasso, who's a fantastic doctor also, by the way, I have to say. When I need info on that subject, I call up John. Thank you, John, very much. Senator Steve Daines, congratulations on a great win. Great win. That was easier than you thought, it turned out, right? It was a little easier than you thought. Great going. We're proud of you. Congressman Greg Walden. Greg, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And Congressman Brad Wenstrup. Thank you, Brad. Great job. And many, many others. My administration provided a total of $14 billion to accelerate vaccine development and to manufacture all of the top candidates in advance, long in advance. As a result of this unprecedented investment, we are exceedingly proud that both Pfizer and Moderna have announced that their vaccines are approximately 95% effective, which is a number that nobody expected to be able to get to, far exceeding anything that really that anybody thought. We went out and we said, what do you think a maximum would be? And I think, doctors, we all came up to the conclusion that something like that would be really incredible. We have other candidates looking right now. We have some big ones that we're going to be announcing very soon. We have some companies, great companies out there you all know about, Johnson & Johnson and others, and they're all coming in, and they're coming in very quickly. We expect to have some news on that very shortly. And we have worked very well with the companies, but if for any reason we have any problems, we will be instituting the Defense Production Act, and we will make sure that we don't have any problems for very long. We've instituted it before. 2 additional companies, AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson. As you know, the Johnson & Johnson's a one-dose, one-shot vaccine, so we're going to see how that works. That would be very helpful if that all came out, and I think it probably will. Also, they're showing tremendous promise, all of them, tremendous promise. We're very hopeful that the FDA will authorize the Pfizer vaccine within days. We've got to get it moving. And Moderna vaccine almost immediately thereafter. Large numbers of tests and samples have been done, so hopefully that'll go very quickly. If authorized, tens of millions of vaccine doses will be available this month, and we'll get it distributed very quickly. We have that all set, and hundreds of millions more will quickly follow. Every American who wants the vaccine will be able to get the vaccine, and we think by spring we're going to be in a position that nobody would have believed possible just a few months ago. You know, amazing, really amazing. They say it's somewhat of a miracle, and I think that's true. The plan we put forward prioritizes the elderly and patients with underlying conditions, as well as healthcare workers and first responders. The ultimate decision rests with the governors of the various states, and I hope the governors make wise decisions who will decide where the vaccines will go in their state and who will get them first. We urge the governors to put America's seniors first, and also I think those who work with seniors, which obviously you're going to have to do that. I think they have to go together. And doctors, nurses, first responders, etc. This will quickly and dramatically reduce deaths and hospitalizations, and within a short period of time, I think we want to get back to normal. It's a very standard phrase. We want to just get back to normal, get back to where we were a little more than 9 months ago. We're doing incredibly. And in many respects, we're still doing incredibly with our stock markets and everything else, which are hitting all new highs. We've already finalized a partnership with Walgreens and CVS, whose executives join us today. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much. We appreciate it very much. And they will deliver vaccines directly to nursing homes as soon as the states request that they do so. Later today, General Gus Perna will outline the detailed plan to rapidly distribute the vaccine to every state, territory, and tribe. States have designated over 50,000 sites that will receive the vaccine. We've worked very closely with the states. Actually, we've had very good relationships with the governors. I almost think all of the governors, at least in those conference calls that are somewhat secret, other than sometimes on occasion, Mike, the press will break in, which is fine too. It's amazing how you leave those rooms and about 10 seconds later, there wasn't even time for a leak. They were on the call, but that's all right. So you assume that. You always assume that. But they'll be going through pharmacies, hospitals, healthcare providers. Through our partnership with FedEx, UPS, and McKesson, we'll ship doses from warehouses directly to the designated sites. And we're thrilled to be joined by representatives of those really great American companies. Those companies have worked with us, and they've been incredible to work with, and I want to thank you all for being here. Please, thank you very much. Thank you very much. As I've stated all along, and I guess as you saw pretty vividly, I heard about what they were going to show prior to my coming. You saw that very few people thought that this was possible. Of course, they'll be saying now, we always told you it was so, but we have them saying a little bit different, but it has been incredible, and it will end the pandemic. It will end the pandemic, and we're working with other nations, as you see actually by looking at your screen today. We're working very closely with other nations also to get the vaccines out to other nations, and that's very important. We work with the world. We're working with the world. We have great companies, and we're working with the world. In just a few minutes, I'll sign an executive order to ensure that the United States government prioritizes the getting out of the vaccine to American citizens before sending it to other nations. Now, if necessary, I told you we'll invoke the Defense Production Act, but we don't think it'll be necessary. If it is, it's a very powerful act, as you know, because we've used it very, very successfully. While we begin to swiftly deploy the vaccine, we'll continue to expand the availability of groundbreaking therapies. Since April, advances in treatments have already helped reduce the mortality rate by 85%. Think of that, 85%. It's an incredible number. I've delivered on my solemn promise to make the antibody treatments, they're brilliant, they're highly successful, available to every American, and we're doing that free of cost, totally free of cost. So we're making them available, and they're available now. And if somebody gets sick, it works where they go and they get treatment if that's what the doctors are prescribing. And it's been incredible, the success. And when you hear 85%, that's some number. To me, that's a number that goes along with anything else, including the vaccines, when you think about it, as well as we've done with the vaccines. When you hear 85%, people find that one hard to believe. But you look at the stats and you see what's happening, and you look at other countries. They're having tremendous difficulties in Europe, tremendous, relatively beyond what we're having. They're having them all over the world. But this will vanquish the problem, this horrible scourge, as I call it, the China virus, because that's where it came from. And the virus has really been looked at and studied all over the world, and our scientists, our industrial and economic mobilization has been like nobody else in the world could have done. And it's very important that we share that with others and other nations. I've worked and invoked the Defense Production Act over 100 times to manufacture essential supplies in the United States, despite the grim projections from the media 8 months ago where they said this was impossible. They actually said, and you saw that a little bit, but I could give you 2 hours worth of it. But they said it will never happen. You could never do it. It was a pipe dream. But we did something that nobody thought was possible, and we also did it where no American who has needed a ventilator has been denied a ventilator. When this first came out, we weren't equipped for that. Nobody was equipped for that. And we're now making ventilators, and we have all we need in this country, but we're sending them to countries all over the world. We're making thousands and thousands of ventilators a month. The United States has also created the largest, most advanced, and most innovative testing program in the world by far. We've conducted over 200 million tests. Think of that, 200 million tests, more than all of the European Union combined. It's not even close. Just 10 months ago, none of these innovations even existed. The tremendous progress that we've made is a testament to what our nation is capable of. When America is faced with a challenge, we come through, and we always come through to overcome every hardship and surmount every obstacle. And I think you'll be seeing that over the next few months. The numbers should skyrocket downward. We are the most exceptional nation in the history of the world. Today, we're on the verge of another American medical miracle. And that's what people are saying. People that aren't necessarily big fans of Donald Trump are saying, whether you like him or not, this is one of the greatest miracles in the history of modern day medicine or any other medicine, any other age of medicine. American companies were the first to produce a verifiably safe and effective vaccine. Together we will defeat the virus, and we will soon end the pandemic, and we will save millions and millions of lives, both in our country and all over the world, and we've already started. Thank you again to every person here today, and for the incredible achievements that you've done. You're going to be very proud of this day, and you're going to be very proud of this period of time, because nobody thought this was possible. Nobody thought it was even remotely possible to do what we've done in a period of less than 9 months, something that just not even thinkable. And we took a lot of heat when we said this is our goal, and we frankly weren't even quite using the numbers that we used. We far exceeded what we thought. If we would have said sometime next year, I think most people would have said that would be great, that would be a miracle. But we did it long before sometime next year. So now I want to ask several leaders who have been crucial in this effort to join me on stage as I sign the executive order to ensure that American citizens have first priority to receive American vaccines, and then we're going to be working with other countries all over the world, and I think we'll be able to start doing that almost immediately also, because we have millions of doses coming in. So thank you very much. Thank you. It's a great honor.
All right, you've been listening to President Trump there at the South Court Auditorium at the White House. Specifically, he's getting ready to sign an executive order that basically will prioritize COVID-19 vaccines for U.S. citizens. I think there's been some concerns about vaccines going outside the country from American companies.
Yeah, I mean, there was a report in the New York Times just last night that said that Pfizer had actually made an offer to the Trump administration to buy a large number of those doses. The Trump administration passed on it. And look, this executive order
Several months ago, I think
several months ago.
Summer, right?
Yeah, several months ago. So and that's why we do see the vaccine going to other parts of the world. I will also say that this executive order is largely symbolic in the sense of what it actually does in terms of getting the vaccine.
Right, and exactly. So but addressing, again, I think the next step and maybe trying to reassure Americans, right, of getting it out there.
Now comes the hard part.
Now comes the logistics.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to monitor that press conference and certainly anything else related to distribution of COVID-19 and the vaccine here in the States. We'll get it out to all of our listeners. At the same time, we did have President-elect Biden in Delaware announcing his new Health and Human Services Secretary, as expected.
As expected. Dueling press conferences.
Which is kind of the world that we are living in. And that was, of course, Javier Becerra. So we'll continue to monitor both of those events. Right now, though, a quick check on the trading day. Let's get to Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. And here's what's going on. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. Stocks did advance to session highs while the president was speaking. You heard it live here on Bloomberg Radio. President Trump signing an order giving American citizens priority on vaccines. Also says he will use the Defense Production Act if needed, but unlikely. Stocks are advancing as prospects for further stimulus talks tempered concern about a jump in coronavirus cases that could lead to tougher restrictions. S&P 500 index on track for a record close on word that Republican congressional leaders plan to speak with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows today about COVID-19 relief. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up now by 161 points. That is a gain of about 0.6%. The NASDAQ 100 index is pushing higher. It is having its longest winning streak in almost a year, up 10 in a row now on the NASDAQ 100 index, up today by 0.4%. NASDAQ at a record up 67, up 0.5%. Year to date, up 40.3%. S&P higher, as I mentioned, also at a record up 14 now, up by 0.4%. 10-year up 4/30 seconds. 10-year yield 0.90%. Gold up 0.6%, 18.73 the ounce, and crude down 0.2%, 45.65 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. A busy start on this. It is Tuesday, yes. Dueling press conferences. Carol Massar along with Tim Stenovic of Bloomberg Quick Take. And I do want to get right to our first guest because I feel like there's a lot going on with the vaccine, the Pfizer news, and of course hearing from President Trump there in terms of the rollout. So let's get right to Michael Dowling. He's president and CEO at Northwell Health. They are it is the largest healthcare provider, I should say, and private employer in New York State. They have treated over 100,000 COVID-19 patients since the start of the pandemic. Michael is also the author of the book Leading Through a Pandemic. Michael is also the author of the book Leading Through a Pandemic: The Inside Story of Humanity, Innovation, and Lessons Learned During COVID-19. He joins us on the phone from New Hyde Park, New York. Michael, thank you so much for your patience today. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be on. Thank you.
It's so good to have you back with Tim and myself. So tell me a little bit about, there's a lot going on today. We just heard from the president. We're listening to President-elect Biden also saying that it may take longer than we like to get out the vaccine as he lines up his health team and his new administration there. What is most important? I'm assuming the Pfizer news.
Well, I think what's important, and we should be celebrating, and that is that we finally have a vaccine that we can actually start to distribute. But I think everybody should be well aware that this is going to be many, many months before we're able to vaccinate the bulk of the population. And then we obviously have to deal with the issue that many people in the public are very hesitant about taking a vaccine. So while it's a great news that we have it, and it's a great news that it's beginning, which we should celebrate, as I said, but this is a long haul. This is not a quick fix answer at the moment, and it should in no way give the opportunity for people to say that they don't need to be mask wearing and social distancing and doing all of the prevention issues that we have been talking about for a long time.
Right.
So it's great news, but the implementation of this is not easy. It's going to be complicated. We will deal with it. We will succeed on it. And with it, but it's going to be months and months and months.
Well, Michael, to that end, I mean, you have 74,000 employees at Northwell Health. When are they getting the vaccine?
Well, the first batch of vaccines we are supposed to get at the beginning of next week. The number of doses that we're going to get, I think we don't know exactly yet, but they're relatively small numbers compared to the numbers of people we have got. Obviously, we prioritize. We'll prioritize using the first people to get the vaccine will be intensive care workers and emergency department workers. The latest news that I heard is that I'll get somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 doses of the vaccine. That's good news, but it's a small number, and it will come out incrementally over the next month to 2 months, etc. So to do all employees, it's probably going to take the next month or so. That's assuming we get the doses that on the incremental basis that we assume we will. So we probably will be starting at the beginning of next week. Tuesday, Wednesday is my guess.
And do you anticipate that you will, I'm assuming, do the 2 doses that's necessary? I mean, that's what you guys are going to assume that you will have enough to do?
Yes, they apparently will give you the doses for the first round, and then they come back and they give you the number for the second round. So you have to get the 2 doses because the vaccine begins to really take effect after you get the second dose, which is about 3 weeks after you get the first one. And the management of that and the data systems you need on that are pretty complicated. But yes, we will be doing both. Obviously, you have to. And then we got the nursing homes are going to get done, and the staff that I just mentioned will get done, and then you go to the next tiers of staff over the next month or 2.
Are you at all nervous that you won't get everything you need? And I just think about all the promises for PPE, during the height of the virus in the springtime here, and the supply chain was terrible. Are you nervous at all, though, Mike, that there's going to be some problems, some hiccups along the way?
Oh, there will be hiccups along the way. There will be confusion along the way. That's the reality of all of these things. We are very well prepared here at Northwell. We have unbelievably detailed plans. We know exactly what we need to do. But it would be foolish to think that this is going to go so smoothly that nothing will happen that will create a hiccup. I mean, it will happen. We just have to respond to it. As I told staff this morning when I met with them, is that we have to manage the confusion intelligently. That's what we have to do. But that's what operations does all the time anyway. Nothing that has to be operationalized always goes smoothly. That's the fact of life. It is what it is, and we will just have to deal with it. We have all the processes in place. If we get enough doses to do everybody and in the sequence that they suggest, then we will be fine. And if we have to change along the way, we change along the way. That's the nature of the operations.
Well, Michael, I want to get an update about COVID capacity and hospital capacity in your health system right now. You treated nearly 20% of all of New York State, over 100,000 COVID-19 patients. What are the hospitals like right now?
Right now, we have today about 760 cases in our hospital. And that has gone up from about 80 patients. This is on a daily basis, about 3 weeks ago. So the increase has been large. But we got to put it in context. Back in April, at the height, when we were at the epicenter, at the height of the issue, we had 3,500 patients in our hospitals. So while 700 looks like it's a huge number, it is very small relative to what we had before. So we are prepared if the number keeps going up, which I assume it will, given the holiday season, and I do believe that probably the worst period of time will be right after Christmas, first couple of weeks in January. But we are ready. We have the capacity. We have the supplies. The staff morale is good. We have the staff. If we need more ICU capacity, we've got it. So we're pretty well prepared. And I'm working with all of the other health systems in New York, especially in downstate here in New York. And we talk on a continuous basis. And I think we are ready. We handled it before. We will handle it again. I don't think we will get back to anything close to what we had back in April. That's our hope, of course. But if it does happen, we will be able to take care of it. We're better positioned today than we were 6 months ago. We have better treatment methodologies. Not as many people are going into ICUs today. Not as many people are being intubated today. The treatments are better and the processes are better. But with regard to capacity supplies, we are in a good position.
So wait, I just want to make sure I heard the numbers right. So you said 760 cases, COVID cases in your hospital today from 80 a few weeks ago?
About 3 weeks ago, we had, let's say 3 to 4 weeks ago, we had about 80 on a daily basis.
Okay, so exponentially.
And then it started to creep up, it got to 150, 200. And in the last week, it has jumped, post-Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And then we have, obviously, the election process. During the election, there was a lot of people out and about. And then we have pockets in the community that decide, for whatever stupid reason, do not want to wear masks and do not want the social distance and are not complying with public health safety standards. And in those communities, you do have a higher incidence of infections. And it's distressing that you still have people out there that seem to deny the logic that they should be wearing a mask. Where there are those pockets of non-compliance is where you see the highest incidence of infection and the highest incidence of hospitalization.
Given that we've seen so much resistance to wearing masks, it's becoming this political issue. What does that tell you about communicating the safety and efficacy of the vaccine to a large number of Americans who might be skeptical of it?
Yes, and there is a lot of skepticism out there, especially among the minority community. So we will be launching, and I know the state will be doing the same thing. We will be launching a very strong communication policy and procedures, educating the public that this is safe. But you are going to still have quite a number of people who will be very, very skeptical. This is not just the United States; this is worldwide. So we're going to do the best we possibly can to explain to people that this is an effective treatment. This is important to do. We have to get vaccinated. And if you care about the community and you care about your neighbors and your friends and your family members, you wear a mask and you also get vaccinated. It's not one or the other, by the way. Because by the time we get everybody done and by the time you get to the general public, you're probably at the end of the spring, if not into the beginning of the summer, before you get to the real general public, the non-risk people.
Mike, I want to ask you something because I do wonder, right, we're all anticipating as more travel happens over the holidays here in December and what it looks like in January. There's certainly actions to kind of roll back what's going on in restaurants, inside restaurants and stuff. Right. Are those the things that you agree that we need to shut down that maybe could help slow some of the numbers? Or how do you feel about that? What are the events that really make you the most nervous here?
Well, it means to be the first part of it. Your question first is, it's not. I don't think you've got anybody that is very happy about having to shut down anything because you need to get the economy back. When you shut down, you affect people's livelihoods, their income, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But where you do have micro clusters and where you see infection accelerating and you see locations where hospitalizations really spike, then I think you have no option but to seriously consider some temporary shutdowns. Because in many ways, what the community is basically saying to you, in those areas, we're not about to comply. We don't want to comply. We're not fully complying, and therefore there's a penalty associated with that. Now, unfortunately, there's many of the businesses who might be very compliant themselves, but members of the community are not, are negatively affected by that decision. So I think that has to be an option that is always kept open. The governor spoke about this yesterday, I believe. So yes, we have to do the tough things and the things that people don't like so that we can get over this, beat this disease, and then get back to normal business. If we don't take these drastic actions at a micro level, you're going to be in this situation for a long period of time. The quickest way to get over COVID is compliance.
Right,
And
which is why we talk about stimulus needed, right?
Yes.
Tim, and I'm thinking about, Tim and I have had tons of conversations about that. We've just got to do this already.
We've got to do this. And to your point about masks, Mike, I mean, we did just hear the President-elect, Vice President Biden, or President-elect Biden now calling on all Americans to wear masks in public for the first 100 days, as he's vowed to get 100 million doses of a vaccine to Americans in his first 100 days.
Well, you have an interesting comparison.
Go ahead.
Today. You have the current president not wearing a mask and holding meetings where people don't wear masks. And you have the incoming president talking about you have to wear masks. And of course, the incoming president is right on this. And imagine if you had taken that position nationally a year ago, 9 months ago, where you had no national leader stand up and say, I believe the science, we should all wear masks, take the tough medicine now. Imagine we probably would be in a much better position, but you've had a colossal failure with leadership on this at our national leadership level. And but today you've got an interesting comparison of what's right and what's wrong. And I get frustrated with this, which I think a lot of people are. I'm in the middle of it. I mean, I don't want to walk into a hospital and see people dying anymore. I don't want to see people in ICUs and people being intubated because of the fact that people just didn't comply with basic common sense, humanistic public policy prevention methods. So it's annoying.
No, I hear you. Mike, so let's think about when we get on the other side of this, because I'm concerned about, I'm sure you're watching your team, their wellness, their mental wellness, and also kind of your financial wellness as a healthcare organization. I think there's about $1 billion shortfall, right, or concerns that a hit that you've taken because of the virus. So where are we on that? And just got roughly about 45, 50 seconds here.
Oh, okay. On the economic side of it, we talk about $1.5 billion revenue loss, but we did get money from the government through the CARES Act. So we'll end up the year with a loss, of course, but it's not that bad. And we have a budget done for next year. And assuming there isn't a humongous disaster, we will be pretty strong next year. It is what it is. You deal with it. I've told everybody here, when you're dealing with a crisis that affects the public, you don't worry about the budget. You deal with the budget afterwards. You do what's right for the community, and you move on. And in many ways, you just, suck it up and deal with it. I mean, there's no choice in the matter. We got to do the right thing. And if you do the right thing, at the end of the day, you always win.
All right. Mike, we wish you well. Stay safe, and I'm sure we'll talk with you again, but we wish you and your teams well all through all of this, which we know is going to be a pretty tough month. Mike Dowling, President and Chief Executive Officer at Northwell Help, on the phone from New Hyde Park, New York. I feel like he's sending a message to Washington.
With the masks.
Yeah, and just we need some help here, too. All right, let's get a check on world and national news. Over to Nancy Lyons, we go in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. President-elect Joe Biden is mapping out his health strategy for the first 100 days of office. It includes everyone wearing a mask and also distributing the needed vaccines.
100 million shots in the first 100 days. And we'll follow the guidance of science to get the vaccines to those most at risk.
Biden is urging Congress to approve more money for distribution of the vaccines, or else, he says, Americans will wait months longer to receive their shot. President Trump is holding a vaccine summit this afternoon to highlight the rapid development of a COVID-19 vaccine. He's encouraged by the 2 vaccines that have been submitted for emergency use authorization from Pfizer and Moderna.
If authorized, tens of millions of vaccine doses will be available this month, and we'll get it distributed very quickly. We'll have that all set, and hundreds of millions more will quickly follow. Every American who wants the vaccine will be able to get the vaccine.
President Trump says nobody thought it would be possible to come up with an effective vaccine within 9 months. He calls it a miracle. British citizens are the first to receive vaccines for the coronavirus. Today, Nurse Mary Parsons administered Britain's first shot outside of the trials.
I think we're all looking forward to actually giving our vulnerable patients in the community to have some protection from this devastating virus. And I think as a nurse, that's really important for me, knowing that they're going to be safe, they're going to be protected.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week on what's turning out to be, a really busy Tuesday. Carol Master along with Tim Stenovic, a Bloomberg Quick Take. So let's talk about, Michael Dowling, pretty strong words in terms of what we just heard, but he's seen so much over there at Northwell.
Yeah, they were in the thick of it. Back in March and April, the number of patients that they were treating. And look, it was dismaying to hear that he was at under 100 patients being treated for COVID at the hospital just a few weeks ago, and now close to 1,000. That's upsetting.
That's
exponential
huge
growt, exactly, and it's going to get worse.
Right.
But contextualizing it for what his hospital system dealt with back in March and April, it's barely 10% of that.
Right. In terms of above 3,000, right, cases that he was talking about?
It was above 3,000, yeah.
Yeah,
So
hospitalizations. And he doesn't expect it to get back there, but he is a little nervous. I think the whole world is kind of on pins and needles. I used to say we know it's a little bit of a shorter window, but in 2-week increments when something happened. I felt like in my own life, like if I did something, I'm like, okay, well, I've got to just wait and see what happens in the next two weeks. And I feel like that's kind of where we are, waiting to see the impact right from Thanksgiving, and then layer on top of that the rest of the holidays.
And Carol, you brought up the economic implications of this on his own business, and he said there's over $1 billion shortfall.
And they're a healthy healthcare system.
They're a healthy healthcare system, and you say that there's certainly a message for the government there about what the government needs to do or could do, I think, in order to help businesses. But we saw earlier this week the National Restaurant Association saying 110,000 restaurants in the U.S., that's 1/6 of restaurants, permanently closed or have been closed for a very long time because of the pandemic.
Exactly. And, I went home and my husband brought up the same article, and we just kind of kept the conversation going about all these businesses that are done. And so this is the problem. It gets hard to tell people you can't go to work, you've got to stay home, when you've got to go to work to make sure that there's a roof over your family's heads and that there's food on the table. So that's why we keep talking about the need for aid.
And here we are, another day without aid.
Another day, exactly, kind of watching it. So fingers crossed that hopefully something happens ultimately out of D.C. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We're looking at records on Wall Street with the S&P, NASDAQ at records right now. The Dow pushing higher, up 116 points, up 0.4%. S&P up 12. That is a gain of 0.3%, bringing its year-to-date gain to 14.6%. NASDAQ is surging 66 points, up 0.5 so far this year. NASDAQ up 40.3%. Stocks are advancing as prospects for further stimulus talks temper concern about a jump in coronavirus cases that could lead to tougher restrictions. Right now, we have got the 10-year yielding 0.90%, up 430 seconds. Gold up 0.4% at $18.70 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.3%, $45.62 a barrel. Pfizer shares higher as regulators give early indications they may grant emergency use authorization to its vaccine. Pfizer shares up 2.4%. Checking some of the other big vaccine names today, we've got BioNTech out of Germany up 1.8%. Moderna out of Cambridge up 4.2%. AstraZeneca up by 1%. And there will be no Ohio State-Michigan football game in 2020. This according to the University of Michigan, making the announcement today, citing positive COVID-19 tests and quarantine requirements. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, it is indeed. Thank you so much. So this story, Tim, is among our most read on the Bloomberg. It's about how, yes, the app that has been one of the big stories in our markets universe this year, I'm talking about Robinhood, it's actually losing thousands of traders to a rival. Webull, out of China.
Right.
And I know you guys talked about this earlier on Quick Take.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to Annie again, though, because this is just a really interesting story. And I think the most interesting element is this is a Chinese company.
Exactly. So let's get into it. Annie Massa is with us, Bloomberg News investing reporter. She is with us on the phone in New York City, along with Bloomberg Business Week editor Joel Weber on the Access line in Brooklyn. Annie reporting for Bloomberg Business Week. Joel, it's just a reminder, Robinhood a big deal, but there's somebody nipping at its heels.
Yeah, and it's one of these sort of stories that I kind of love, where Robinhood has been basically just a phenomenon during the pandemic, and along comes like an upstart that's kind of got its own kind of way of doing things that's been different than Robinhood, which also had its own way of doing things. So it's almost like they're getting schooled a little bit in their own game. And as Annie is about to, I think, tell us, they've done it by actually going the opposite way of Robinhood, where Robinhood made everything very streamlined and almost stripped down and bare bones. They've actually flooded it with more information rather than less. Annie, why does that seem to be working so far?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You have this kind of difference between, on one end of the spectrum, you have Robinhood, which is just for a complete entry-level trader, very simple, very clean graphics. And, if you think the way other end of the spectrum might be like an interactive brokers with more sophisticated analysis and real-time data, Webull sits a little bit in between those two. And it's trying to reach out to the same kinds of users that Robinhood is after, the younger kinds of demographic, the more social-oriented types of traders, but it's doing it in a way where the format is slightly more sophisticated, slightly more information than you're getting when you log into a Robinhood account.
Yeah, Annie, I'm curious, too, about this idea of this being a Chinese company. And this is something we talked about on Quick Take earlier today, because think about TikTok and the problems that TikTok has had with the U.S. government. I mean, financial services are regulated so much more.
It's like, how's this going to work?
Yeah, than a social media company. So how are they going to pull this off with CFIUS?
You're exactly right. And I think TikTok is a very high-profile example, but we've really seen how the tensions between the U.S. and China and the trade war and just this rising geopolitical tension between the two countries has been affecting the business world and really creeping into finance as well. So we mentioned in the story how we've already seen, the Trump administration kind of thinking about possibly placing restrictions on Chinese payment platforms or threatening to kick companies from China off of U.S. exchanges. So for now, Webull has not been caught up in that fray, but it certainly could be an issue for a company like this down the line.
So Annie, what more do we know about Webull in terms of like how many users are on the platform? What kind of growth are we seeing here? We mentioned that it's peeling traders away from Robinhood, but like how big of an opportunity does Webull think it sees here?
That's right. So Webull's still smaller than Robinhood, but they've been growing fast. They've grown their client base by about tenfold this year, so they have about 2 million customers now. Now that compares to Robinhood that has more than 13 million customers, and they've been going completely gangbusters in terms of new signups this year. But still, for a newer company without as much name brand recognition, broadly speaking, as Robinhood, that is a significant user base.
And talk to us more about the stealth mode, because I thought that was a really curious thing. Like they've really just cloaked their operation. They do have an office in downtown New York, in right off Wall Street. But why run so quietly? A lot of people who are listening to this might be hearing about it for the first time.
That's right. So they haven't done any big kind of ad campaign or advertised really aggressively. And we were talking to the U.S. CEO who said, we're trying to stay under the radar a little bit for now and grow without making a huge splash. It's still a very competitive space, and Webull has been fortunate enough to pick up some of the customers that have been frustrated by Robinhood, who seek out other options, and then they kind of come across Webull and say, hey, I might like to try and open a brokerage account there instead of at Robinhood, either because they're frustrated with the service at Robinhood or because they want to like level up their account a little bit.
So I just think just because they have a customer service line, they're going to be like, way ahead of Robinhood. Annie, so tell us about, is money coming in, investor money? What's their plan here?
That's right. So they're on the brink of raising another fundraising round. They expect to raise about $100 million for a valuation of possibly over $1 billion. So that would put them in unicorn status territory. They are trying to attract investors at this moment.
Carol alluded to this with the reference to the actual helpline that they have. But I'm wondering how Robinhood's missteps this year sort of create an opportunity for not just companies like Webull, but other disruptors to come in and get those frustrated customers.
Yeah, Robinhood has really had this wild year where they've grown so much in the public imagination, but they've also had some really high-profile lapses. So they had an outage that lasted more than a day in March. They've had an issue with hacking of some accounts that we reported on earlier this fall. And each time you've seen users go online, vent their frustration, and some of them have even threatened to leave and seek out other kinds of brokerages. So Webull is a beneficiary in the sense that they can pick up some of those customers with a very, an app that's similar. It's very mobile forward and targeted to maybe a younger, more social user base. And when those customers are seeking out some other kind of service, they can use Webull.
Good stuff. I love these kind of stories. Annie, thank you so much. Annie Massa, investing reporter at Bloomberg News, with us on the phone from New York. Jill Weber, editor of Bloomberg Business Week on the remote access. And you can certainly find more on that story. Just go to the Bloomberg terminal or Bloomberg.com. What's interesting, too, is I think the people behind this are just as interesting. And we scratched the surface on that. But, right, it's somebody who was an Alibaba alum, right?
Yeah, and when you think about, the companies in China, right, A, B, C, right, Alibaba, Baidu, and of course Tencent as well.
Right.
Those are the companies that control everything when it comes to consumer technology. So it's not surprising to see alumnus of that company build something like this.
Right. Understand how it's done, right? And be able to tap into another network. Really cool stuff. So check that one out. And actually, we're going to talk with another player in the low-fee, no-fee trading world. We'll get to that a little bit later on, just before the market wraps up. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Tuesday, December 8th. Stocks higher across the board. S&P, NASDAQ, they are at records as prospects for stimulus talks temper concern about tougher restrictions amid a coronavirus resurgence. Right to the numbers. S&P up 11, trading above 3,700 for the first time. 3,703 on the S&P, up 0.3%. Year to date, up 14.63%. NASDAQ up 64 right now. That is a record as well, up 0.5%. So far this year, NASDAQ up 40.2%. The NASDAQ 100 index up 10 in a row, up today by 0.4%. The Dow pushing higher by 101 points, up by 0.3%. We've got the 10-year up 3/32, 10-year yield right now 0.91%. Gold up 7.60 the ounce, up 0.4% at 1870, and crude falling today, down 0.3%, 45.63 for a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude. Small business optimism in the U.S. dropped by more than forecast in November as a resurgence in the coronavirus and the election outcome more than offset favorable news about a vaccine. Brad Close is president of the National Federation of Independent Business.
So, some small businesses are doing really well, but a lot of them, depending on industry, are not. And so what they're telling us is, 1 in 5 isn't going to make it 6 months without some help. So the things they need to see are a second bite at the apple at the PPP program. They need Congress to have an easy loan forgiveness program. And they really are telling us that they want to see a deductibility of those business expenses associated with the PPP loan process so they don't get whacked by the tax bill after taking a loan out.
Toll Brothers is reporting better than expected order growth, a sign that home buyers rushing to the suburbs during the pandemic are fueling a boom in luxury sales. But Toll Brothers shares, they're plunging today by 8.4% after earnings. And JetBlue is going to pause merit raises and paid paternal leave for most employees. This according to a CNBC report. We've got JetBlue shares lower now by 0.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser on Bloomberg Radio.
You are listening to Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Business Week on this Tuesday. Carol Masser along with Tim Stenovic of Bloomberg Quick Take, which you can catch at 9 and noon, streaming.
Oh, yeah, and throughout the day.
And throughout the
We're
day.
just live at 9, noon, 4:35.
No, sorry, I've been promoting you, but there's other people too.
Yeah, there are.
Sorry.
And you can watch us on all the platforms, Apple TV, Roku, and the like.
Good to know, right? All that streaming that's going on. A lot of stuff. And I know you guys spent a lot of time on what I think, hands down, is our top story of the day, and that was the news from Pfizer.
Right, the news from Pfizer, and then also what's happening in the UK, too, which is
rolling out the vaccine.
As they say, people are getting jabbed, right?
Getting jabbed. Getting the vaccine, they are doing it. So, listen, one of our go-to voices, she makes us all smarter, is Bloomberg News health, science, and medical technology reporter Michelle Cortez. She is back with us from Minneapolis. Michelle, I was listening to you this morning on Bloomberg Radio. You were reading through the FDA report. I think it was, is it 96, 97 pages or something like that?
It is. Yes, it is.
But who's counting?
But that's why I want to talk to you, because you go through it. So tell us the significance of the news that we got on the Pfizer vaccine today from the FDA.
So what we are seeing here is really the detailed information from the Pfizer and BioNTech trials. This is the information that everybody has been waiting for, because up until this point, all we've really received is a press release that says about 95% effective. And while that's great, it doesn't really provide as much information as people want. So what we're doing now is we're getting some incremental data on how different groups are doing. If you're older, if you're male or female, if you are a minority, if you are high risk, if you have other comorbidities, how is this vaccine going to work out for you? Newsflash, it looks like it's about the same for everybody. Everybody is above 90% in every category that they looked at.
Michelle, is this
things like,
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, is this rare for a vaccine to have this kind of efficacy, and then have this effect on multiple types of people based on age, comorbidities, et cetera?
Well, it really depends on what you're looking at, because vaccines don't normally fall into this kind of a category, right? We normally have vaccines for children, for, measles and chickenpox and whooping cough and that sort of thing. And of course, those vaccines are very effective, but they are in children, and you're not trying to vaccinate, huge numbers of people. So, but in that category, yes, usually across different ethnicities and races, that sort of thing, we do have pretty similar effectiveness levels. If you're looking at the broader population, if you're looking at an influenza vaccine, for example, then no, I mean, it's phenomenally more effective than what we see for most respiratory illnesses. And I don't think anybody was really expecting that we would get vaccine results that were more like the childhood vaccines rather than other respiratory vaccines.
So, So help us understand the magnitude of the data that you got today and where it falls into sort of this 11-month, I don't want to say adventure, but nightmare that we've been on.
Right. It has been a nightmare, hasn't it? But, the thing that's not been a nightmare has been the science. It is absolutely remarkable that they have been able to do this heavy lift. I mean, you have to remember these vaccines that we're talking about this week, the mRNA vaccines from Pfizer and from Moderna, there are no other vaccines that work this way. This is the very first. And not only that, they've been developing these mRNA vaccines for years now for other conditions. But for this condition, they did it in less than a year, well less than a year. It's just absolutely phenomenal. And as far as what it means, we talked about the efficacy. It's looking really strong across the board. That we now have some detail on safety. Of course, we only have it out to about 2 or 3 months, so we don't know definitively how safe it's going to be, but there really aren't any signs of concerning results here.
Bam, wait, I want to go there. Stop for a second, because I'm thinking, Michelle, people are listening, and Michelle's like, yeah, look at how fast they got it done. It's pretty remarkable. This is new, technology they've been working on, but these are the first of a kind vaccine. So there are going to be those people who are listening to that and saying, well, wait a minute. It's the first of these kinds of vaccine. Great for science, but that makes me a little bit nervous. What you understand this world, Michelle, like no other. So what can you tell people who are saying, well, wait, this is new science. They did it faster. We don't really have the long-term, meaning duration, over multiple years of the long-term potential impact. So what do you tell those people?
Well, yeah, Carol, you're absolutely right. It's a real issue on 2 different fronts, both on the safety and the efficacy. When you talk about efficacy, these results look really dramatic at first, but we've only been given these vaccines for, a few months now. So we have no idea how long this protection is going to last and whether or not we're going to be needing repeat vaccines and whether it will be helpful, as you get your 3rd, 4th, 5th. I mean, who knows? It's really a work in progress. We don't have the results. And then there's also the issue of, is it possible that this vaccine could do something deleterious to us down the road that we don't know about? Usually in vaccines, the vast majority of complications occur within 1 month to 45 days.
Oh, okay.
We definitely have that information, so we know that. Like I said before, this mRNA approach has been used for years. So if the platform is bad, if the platform does something inside people's bodies at any kind of a large level, chances are we might have seen it with some of those other approaches, other diseases that they were working on. But, it is a little bit of a gamble in the end. I mean, there's no guarantees here.
Michelle, does the news today change any sort of timeline for when you think the vast majority of Americans are going to have access to this vaccine?
You got about 45 seconds.
This result won't change that at all, because every American who is following what's going on wants this vaccine as quickly as they can possibly get it. This only makes that urgency faster. The limitation is not on the desire, it's on the availability.
All right, I saved you 15 seconds. Thursday's the big meeting, right?
Absolutely. You've gotten my take on this, but more than a dozen of the world's most foremost experts on this are going to be meeting on Thursday. They're going to be digging much deeper, looking for anything to be worried about, and making a recommendation at the end of the day on whether or not we should all have access to this vaccine.
That's a huge day. God, I love talking to you. You are the best. Everything we need to know. Michelle Cortez, senior medical reporter at Bloomberg News health science and medical technology reporter, I should say, joining us on the phone from Minneapolis, right? Like, check, everything you need needed to know.
Yeah, she read the 97 pages.
That's why we go to her. All right, and it's also why we go to Nancy Lyons, because she knows everything when it comes to world and national news. Hey, Nancy.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'll tell you some of it. President-elect Joe Biden is vowing to get 100 million doses of coronavirus vaccine distributed to Americans in the first 100 days of his administration. Biden sees it as a costly challenge, and he calls on Congress to designate funds for getting the vaccine to the people who need it.
Without urgent action by this Congress this month to put sufficient resources into vaccine distribution and manufacturing, which the bipartisan group is working on, there's a real chance that after an early round of vaccinations, the effort will slow and stall.
Well, a vaccine developed by the University of Oxford and AstraZeneca appears to provide protection against severe COVID-19. That's according to a peer-reviewed study that shows more analysis, though, is needed to see how well it works in older people. It's said to have an efficacy rate of 70%. The cybersecurity official who was fired by President Trump after he called the 2020 election the most secure in American history is now suing. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager reports.
Christopher Krebs is accusing the Trump campaign, its lawyer Joe DeGeneva, and Newsmax of defamation and inflicting emotional distress. DeGeneva appeared on Newsmax the day after Krebs' interview with CBS's 60 Minutes aired. He said Krebs should be drawn and quartered for his assessment of the election. Krebs is asking for at least $75,000 in damages and for that DeGeneva interview to be removed from the Newsmax archives. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Tim Stenovic, Bloomberg Quick Take. We heard this earlier about what JetBlue is doing. They're going to pause some merit raises for most employees, but they are also pausing plans to offer paid paternal leave.
Parental leave.
Is it all parental?
Oh, paternal leave. Yeah, you're right. Paternal leave. Yeah.
Okay.
So remember a year ago when the unemployment rate was at record lows and companies were throwing whatever they could at employees, potential employees, to retain and attract them?
We were talking about like fast food workers getting bonuses and you name it, and schooling and lots of stuff.
Look, I know the airline industry is different and what they're going through is not what other industries are going through.
Yeah.
But those days are over, at least for the short term. And I expect we are going to see more and more companies cut back on those perks that attracted and retained talent because they won't need to do that in the environment that we're in.
So how do you feel about this?
Not great. I don't feel great about it.
I agree with you, because I think, first of all, let's wait and see, right? I feel like at this point we see the end in sight, and I think there's going to be a huge rush in demand next year for everything.
Including airlines.
Including airlines.
Everyone's going to be going on vacation next summer, Carol.
No, I
Book
do.
it now, because it's probably going to be expensive if demand is high.
I think you're absolutely right, and I do get a little nervous about this. You're right. Like just a few months or earlier this year, you're right. You know, companies were throwing everything because they just needed workers. There was such a shortage, and I do get worried about these kinds of trends, especially with a company like JetBlue, which is, I think, innovative. They are forward-thinking. They do think about their workers. And I just wonder what's up with that.
And look, again, the airline industry is a different animal, and potentially we might not see this across other industries. But if people are looking for work, then they're not going to need the sweet sort of add-ons that companies were giving to try to attract and retain that talent.
This is when I do a sound effect, like the door opening. Like I do get a little nervous when things, because I think these were, when companies have started to do things like paternal leave, right, for all parents, that's progress in terms of initiatives.
It is, and how quickly that progress could be lost.
We'll reach out to JetBlue and maybe they'll come on and explain it to us, because we know that they're feeling some strains.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks are pushing higher. We are looking at records. Let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. U.S. stocks overcame a weak start today with the Dow currently up now 93 points. S&P's gain 11 and NASDAQ climbs by 64. The U.S. 10-year yield at 0.91%, gold trading higher by 8, and transports rise 50 points. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, leaders were energy and consumer staples, utilities and real estate fell, and leaders to the upside in the Dow Inc. and J&J, while Walgreens led to the downside. After earnings, homebuilder Toll Brothers fell as much as 9%. And in other news, Tesla hit another record high. DoorDash is expected to price at the high end or above the $90 to $95 a share level. And Biden says he's encouraged by talks on the $900 billion relief package. Wrapping things up, Chewy and GameStop report after the bell. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie.
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg type squawk, SQUAWK on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It is indeed. All right, Charlie, thank you so much, Charlie Pellet there. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Tim Stenovic, and looking forward to getting into this Bloomberg Business Week Small Business Survival Guide, because it's something, Tim, that perhaps initially was kind of an unforeseen consequence of the pandemic. And I'm talking about kind of our well-being, our mental wellness, but we've been talking a lot about it.
Yeah, I mean, if just thinking back to what we've been through, not even as a business owner, right, over the last few months has been incredibly taxing.
Think about the stress, right?
Think about the stress for people who employ other people and are responsible for others' livelihoods.
Right. Like, I mean, it's just stress on so many different levels. And Nick Leiber knows about that. He's Bloomberg Business Week contributor, and he joins us on the phone from Brooklyn, writing about that specifically. Hey, Nick, good to have you back here on Bloomberg. Tell us about your story.
Carol, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Good to be back. I was just thinking about all these 30 million, businesses, small businesses in the United States, and thinking about what must the pandemic be like now. Feels like it's been months and months and months, because it has been. What is it like for people running their own businesses? A lot of them, even though they're surrounded by people, often feel pretty isolated, like they can't share their problems with their employees or with their customers or with their suppliers. So what are they going through? How is their mental health? And I reached out to professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, and others to hear what their sort of read on how people are doing is. And there are real concerns.
So what are they seeing?
That's what I've been sort of digging into. And when you have elevated stress levels, when you have elevated anxiety, you're not making great decisions. Now, that's not good for anyone, regardless of what you do for a living. But if you also are running a business and people are depending on you, and the economy is depending on you to keep your business going, this can have real consequences, both a personal toll, but also an economic toll.
So, Nick, what are those experts telling you about what they're seeing from their own clients and potential patients?
They're seeing more people who run their own businesses coming in. They're holding workshops. I attended one on Friday, about 100 people, an entrepreneur who had depression multiple times, who talked about what it was like and about the sense of aloneness. So they're seeing people coming in, and they're seeing they're worried about people, and they're encouraging them to reach out both to professionals and also to friends, church groups, others, just to really talk to people and to not sort of keep it bottled up.
Well, what's interesting, I caught up with the CEO of Verizon Business, Tammy Irwin, and we talked a lot about what's going on in her company, specifically about kind of watching out for workers and worried about their mental well-being, and making, it's kind of the onus is on managers to specifically reach out to their workers and make sure they're doing okay. But also talked about stigma, Tim. Like, I think about mental illness. There's still a lot of stigma, unfortunately, to talk about it in a workplace or just talk about it publicly.
Yeah, and that's why I was surprised to hear Nick say that at this workshop he heard someone be really open about the struggles that he'd faced.
Right. So, go ahead, Nick. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that there's also I talked to a really interesting researcher. She's an assistant professor at the University of Ottawa, and she was participating in the workshop. But she said, there's a lot of boosterism around entrepreneurship. We should all start businesses, and that's great. But she also found that many governments, even though they're very boosterish about it, then don't really provide the sort of safety net services that people need when they're out on their own and they're not working for a big company, which I thought was really interesting.
Well, it's also healthcare. I mean, think about the healthcare access too. I've thought about that a lot with small business in general, just basic healthcare access. But then when you think about access to mental health services, you get a little concerned that they don't have that access to it.
Right. That's something that she found. That's something others found. There are different business advocacy groups have been pushing for years just to make it easier for everyone, particularly business owners and their employers, to have access to comprehensive health care. And until that happens, obviously mental health, if you have problems and it's hard to get access, then that sits with you, and it can become a bigger problem than it would have been had you had access to health.
So Nick, what did in your reporting, what did you find the resources that are available to these entrepreneurs, and do you think that there's potential to see new ones crop up because there's an increased need for them during this time?
I mean, the APA, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Crisis Text Line, they all have good websites that have a lot of different resources, but there are also newer sort of approaches. There's a psychiatrist in California who in June launched something called Kona, which is basically an online community that's meant to provide a safe space or a safe place for entrepreneurs to sort of be themselves, to riff off one another, to find a community. So I think Tim, that we'll see more approaches. Then of course there's the whole online phenomena of online therapy,
right?
Which I didn't really get into because I felt like that had been done. But I also read an amazing story about a group for farmers in Wisconsin that basically says, there have been high rates of suicide among farmers, and let's get together and talk about what's going on. Let's not have you be isolated.
I also thought it was interesting. I also thought it was interesting, Nick, in your story, and we'll get this out online so people can read it, but how some research showed the personality traits of an entrepreneur are distinct from other workers in that they are more likely to have some mood conditions and maybe more susceptible to mental illnesses.
Yeah, and the idea of the boosterism, right? Everybody says they should be so enthusiastic about going and working at startups, but it takes a toll.
Nick Leiber, thank you so much, contributor to Bloomberg Business Week. This is Bloomberg.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 1061. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Tim Stenovic. You know what's coming up.
Do I?
Deer in the headlights.
Yeah, I know.
Chart of the day.
I know, but is this where I have to furiously Google what song is coming?
No, you guessed yesterday,
I know.
right? Was it yesterday?
Yeah, it was yesterday.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll have an easy one today. Dave Wilson's going to be along with his chart of the day. We'll get to that in just a moment. All right, Charlie Pellet, what do you got for us?
Well, I got word from Rudy Giuliani, former mayor of New York, says he should be out of self-isolation by Sunday. Made comments to WABC Radio in New York, says he was given remdesivir. Stocks rising toward a record. Prospects for stimulus talks tempering concern about tougher restrictions amid a coronavirus resurgence. We do have 28 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. Stocks holding close to session highs. Right to the numbers. I'll give you more on the reasons why in just a moment. S&P up 12, now higher by 0.3%. That will be a record, trading above 3,700, I should add. NASDAQ also at a record, up 64 points, now up 0.5%. The NASDAQ 100 index looks like it's going to extend its streak to 10 up days in a row, up by another 0.4%. The Dow up 119 points right now, higher by 0.4%. S&P 500 index on track for its highest ever close as Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said Congress needs to pass a relief bill that Republicans and Democrats agree on and should set, quote, aside some issues. Again, recapping, stocks are rallying. S&P at a record up by 0.3%. 10-year yield 0.91%. Gold up 0.4%. 18.69 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude is lower, down 0.3%. WTI 45.63 a barrel. Tesla CEO Elon Musk says he has relocated to Texas. Tesla shares are up today by 0.5%. It is 3:33 on Wall Street. Time now for the Small Business Report. And here's John Tucker.
Cleveland Cinemas is a small business operating 4 independent theaters in Cleveland, Ohio. Owner John Foreman has had to close 2 locations entirely and is open only a few days a week at the others. The pandemic and also the move to streaming means survival of this business is less than certain. John, you've had to dismiss 90% of your staff. How much longer can the business go on like this?
It's very hard. Our business is down by over 85%. This year versus last year. Many theaters have chosen to close permanently. The big chains who have the ability to access cash have announced that they're on the verge of bankruptcy or have gone out and raised more money. I have no idea how they've done that. But can you imagine me, a small business, going to a bank and saying, I need a line of credit because our business is down 85%. How quickly do you think a bank is going to say, oh, John, we'd be happy to give you a loan? We don't want a loan. We want a grant. We want more PPP money, more federal money. So the answer to your question is the only way we can survive is if Congress gets their act together and comes up with another stimulus package that would provide loan money for theaters.
The original PPP, how far did that take you?
It took us from the point in time we got it, which was late April, and those funds ran out at the end of September. And so, again, the good news was we were able to bring back most of our employees, not all of them, but more than half, who got their full pay, which was great. But surprise, surprise, we had to get rid of them a second time. That's a terrible way of referring to it. We had to lay them off. So I've been in business for 40 years, and I have employees who've been with me for more than 15 years who we've had to lay off.
All right, John Foreman of Cleveland Cinemas. That is your Bloomberg Small Business Report.
And we thank you very much, John Tucker. One other note, JetBlue says it's pausing merit raises for most of its employees. This according to CNBC. JetBlue shares, they are trading lower now by 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It is indeed. All right, Charlie, thank you so much. This is Bloomberg. Can take John Lennon and that song and what we were talking about and make it into a chart of the day. And I say that with respect.
There's always a connection. It's just a matter of how far you have to reach to find one.
All right, tell us
In
about the
any
chart.
case,
Yes.
What the chart focuses on is sort of month-by-month performance of the S&P 500 over time. It's based on data compiled by Steven Sutmeyer, who's a technical analyst over at Bank of America. And what he found that was particularly interesting is that December is the month of the year in which the S&P 500 rises most regularly, you might say. It's been up 74% of the time since 1928, which, predecessor indexes to the S&P 500 go back that far, and they were using the calculations. So, you look at the other months, the S&P 500 rises more often than not, but nothing close to what's seen in December. You have to look back to April, and there, you're talking about maybe 65%. So it's quite the gap in terms of performance and shall we say, regularity of performance. Now, it doesn't mean you necessarily get the biggest gain because you look at the figures again. The average advance in December, 1.3%, beaten by July and also by April. So, take what you can get, but chances are that, if you're a stock investor, you're going to have reason to be jolly by the end of the month. You can put it that way. And if you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
Did Dave say it? Tim, are you going to say it at the Santa Claus rally? Did anybody say
Nobody
it?
said it yet.
But the fact is, actually, Sutmeyer goes through the numbers and said, first 10 days of December, really little changed on average. It's the last 10 days, the Santa Claus rally period, at least in part, that, that's where you see the performance kick in.
I guess the question is, do lawmakers have Santa hats on this year? Because if they don't reach something, then potentially kiss that Santa Claus rally
Grinch or
goodbye.
Santa? What will we get from Congress?
Good question.
Right, Dave? That could be but if you think about it, that could be ultimately the catalyst that gives investors some enthusiasm going into the new year.
Yeah, or you could end up, with Mr. Grinch being found in Washington. Pick your favorite politician as far as who that might be, but I digress.
But you digress. All right, Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Good song, great chart. We appreciate it. Dave's going to be back a little bit later on. But think about that. If we get that stimulus package just before they go out on recess, that would certainly give a kick to the markets.
No coal in the stocking either.
No coal in the stocking. All right, you are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Back to World and National News and back to Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. President-elect Joe Biden formally introduced his health team today, a team that includes California Attorney General Javier Becerra as Secretary of Health and Human Services. Speaking at the event in Wilmington, Delaware, the president-elect said the team of healthcare advisors are top-notch.
They're going to be ready on day one to spare not a single effort to get this pandemic under control so we can get back to work, get back to our lives, get back to our loved ones.
He says he wants to see in his first 100 days all Americans wearing a mask, 100 million vaccines being administered, and children returning to in-person learning. Trump supporters are still trying to overturn the election that has made Joe Biden the president-elect. This time it's the state of Texas, filing a bid to get President Trump's election challenge in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. President Trump was pushing for the long-shot bid in his news conference today.
Now let's see whether or not somebody has the courage, whether it's a legislator or legislatures, or whether it's a justice of the Supreme Court or a number of justices of the Supreme Court. Let's see if they have the courage to do what everybody in this country knows is right.
Joe Biden has won both the Electoral College and the popular vote. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says Congress needs to pass a relief bill that Republicans and Democrats agree on, and for now should set aside the issues of liability and state and local aid. It's a change in position for McConnell, who wanted a much smaller package than a bipartisan plan now totaling more than $900 billion. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. This is Bloomberg.
Thank you so much. Nancy Lyons in our DC studio with a World and National News update. So Carol Massar, along with Tim Stenovic, Bloomberg Quick Take right here on Bloomberg Business Week. 2020 is going to go down as the year of a lot of different things, and that includes, I think it was even on the Bloomberg 50, blank check, SPACs.
It was the only inanimate object on the Bloomberg 50
We did
last week,
Popeye's chicken last year because they were shortage supplies. So every once in a while, they make the list.
You know what? Popeye's chicken tastes better than SPACs.
I've never eaten a SPAC. I don't even know what that would be or what that means. So JP Morgan Chase, their Highbridge Capital Management, that was, I believe, Glenn Dugan's hedge fund, if I remember, and they acquired it way back when. In talks, though, to raise $1 billion or more for a strategy dedicated to investing in SPAC companies and related financial instruments, according to those in the know.
So Bloomberg's Jillian Tan is reporting that
She's incredible.
the firm has begun discussions with prospective institutional investors, pension funds, endowments, and the like, retail investors through wealth management platforms. SPACs are so hot, everybody wants in.
Exactly. And, we've had guests on, former, huge restaurant executives. They've started a SPAC to invest in, new restaurant trends. I mean, you see them kind of in all walks of life. And, it's just fascinating how it just kind of started slowly and then everybody was doing it.
And I wonder if they're here to stay this time. Because when you see a trend like this, the question is, is this the top? Is this the type of thing that has sustainability? Or is this just sort of the trend of the year?
Right, exactly. And I think it's interesting, too, because I feel like the trend of the last few years has been the amount of capital that's out there for investing, whether it's VC money, whether it's the ability to tap the the public markets, but here's another bunch of money chasing companies and ideas.
And as Jillian reports, this comes amid a boom in the U.S. for SPACs. They've raised a record in total of more than $68 billion just this year.
Phenomenal. And we still have a few weeks to go.
We do.
And I bet you'll see a few more. And a lot of well-known investment names, right? Hedge fund guys, you name it. Activist investors have gotten in on it as well. So check that story out and more on the Bloomberg Terminal.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. 13 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. S&P tops 3,700 for the first time. Will we close above or below that level? But right now, the S&P at 3,703. Stocks surging. S&P up 11, a gain of 0.3%. We're looking at records for both the S&P and the NASDAQ. Prospects for stimulus talks tempering concern about tougher restrictions amid a coronavirus resurgence. The Dow up 96, up by 0.3%. Again, NASDAQ at a record up 63, up by 0.5. S&P up by 0.3. 10-year yield 0.91%. Gold up 0.4, 18.70 the ounce. Crude a pullback today, down 0.2%. Little change, 45.66 a barrel. Bottom line, stocks heading to records. Stay with us right through the close, and of course, find out how Asian markets react tonight. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the drive to the close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
It is time for the drive to the close. Carol Masser along with Tim Stenovic of Bloomberg Quick Take. And we are seeing, as Charlie mentioned, equity averages holding on to most of their gains, a little bit higher here on the day. Want to get back to our guest, or bring in our guest, Dan Pipitone. He's co-founder of Trade Zero America. He joins us on the phone from Brooklyn. Dan, good to have you here. How are you?
Thanks, Carol. Doing awesome. Happy Friday to you guys.
Awesome.
Happy Friday.
Yeah. Did you say happy Friday?
Mentally, I'm there.
Not even close. Tell us about, we want to get into what you're seeing in terms of on Trade Zero, but we had an earlier story about how the trading platform that we all are talking about this year, Robinhood, is seeing increased competition from the likes of Webull, which was founded by an Alibaba alum, and it's taking a lot of traders from Robinhood. It is increased competition among these no-fee platforms. What are you seeing in terms of interesting either growth or trends among your users?
Sure. Well, this year there's been obviously an explosion of interest in just the markets in general and what it is that we do. But for us, we have seen a huge increase in the attention of investors and traders wanting to play the markets on the short side.
Yeah, what's huge, Dan?
So our short numbers are up close to 300% year over year. We are seeing, many of the new entrants and accounts that we're opening have interest in trading, not just going long and hoping for the best, but actually actively trading the markets in an active way and taking advantage of the ability to go both long and short.
Is this something that you think will be here for the long term, or is this sort of like a pandemic boom and then people go back to normal life and they kind of forget about it?
It's going to be interesting to see, Tim. For a lot of these new investors, they've really only been, investing or participating in the market when it's gone up. Since the beginning of March, we've really been, just in a general kind of straight line north. And it's going to be interesting to see, we would have thought that the electorals would have had some impact, but we're thinking that, just having the certainty in place, even though that's not fully established, that the market has reacted well. So it's going to be really interesting to see as, we navigate more potentially choppy and potentially down markets, what this means for the new investor, if this is, sell and stay away, or if this is now something that they're actively engaged in and continue to participate.
As my grandpa always said, what goes up must come down, and it happens eventually. What are some interesting stocks that you're seeing your users' activity around?
Sure. So lately, the last few weeks has been a lot of intense action on all of the electronic vehicle stocks. Obviously, Tesla leading the way, but NIO, Chinese EV maker, really popping both long and short, really active stock. And one in the last few weeks is ZR, which these guys make the LiDAR lasers for the autonomous driving.
Luminar, right? You're talking about Luminar Technologies.
Luminar. Yeah. The stock's been on fire, but again, these stocks, a lot of them have great news. Will gap up in the morning, creates great trading opportunities for investors throughout the day.
It's up 302% this year, right? And we've seen. I'm just going through. I mean, oh my God, it went through a period the last week or so where you're talking about 30% gains, 36% higher on the day, 31% higher on the day. It's pretty remarkable.
And we had Tesla this morning. I think it hit $680 or way early at 4:30 in the morning in the pre-market. So this little sector has really been on fire lately.
What's been the play on Tesla? Is it all long, or is it a combination of long and short?
It is a combination of both. But generally, for us, for the most part, our client base is mostly flat overnight, where the decisions start being made at from 4 o'clock in the morning on. So the trading opportunity is there, both long and short. As an investment, Tesla has been, for an overall basis, many clients as an investment have been long. But from the trading perspective, they are actively at it, in both directions.
Did you say 4 a.m.?
Yes. So trading begins at trade zero, 4 o'clock in the morning. We carry through till 8 p.m. So it's commission free throughout, and traders can take advantage of the Asian close, the Europe still being open, on into Asia reopening at 8 o'clock at night.
Wow.
Which is what somebody tweeted at me. We did a story on Webull versus Robinhood, and they said Webull allows trading at 4 a.m. So lots of day traders, they said, were up that early. So it sounds like that's when a lot of people, Dan, are kind of taking their positions. Is that fair?
That's right. Yeah. Yep. And playing off of the markets that are still open and those that are closing. So it's a great way, especially for cross-listed stocks.
Yeah.
You really have an opportunity to kind of basically see which direction the issue is trending and take advantage of that.
Dan, what about cannabis stocks? Because we've seen a renewed interest in those since the election.
Yes. The thought process is, we have Congress looking to take on marijuana, the Schedule 1 status. Thought process is, Biden administration is going to be a lot more lax, potentially the cannabis leaving Schedule 1. We've seen a lot of activity in the stocks. Tilray, CGC has been on fire lately. Again, all of these issues played strongly on both the long and short side.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I just want to mention a headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal. President-elect Joe Biden to nominate Lloyd Austin as Secretary of Defense. So we're hearing a little bit more. General Lloyd Austin, I believe it is, recently retired general. So it looks like he may be the president-elect's choice for Secretary of Defense. We were expecting that, I think, today.
Yeah, the news broke last night that this was going to be his choice. And there are concerns over the waiver that he'll be required to get from Congress because it's traditionally a civilian position. And these folks have to be retired for a certain number of years before taking on that role.
So concerns about military influence.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. So, yeah. So, well, I am curious. So, cannabis was certainly an election trade here. What else are you seeing, Dan, in terms of trades? Just got about 40 seconds left here.
Lots of COVID-related issues. Like I said, overnight, many stories, many symbols come out with news, whether it be treatment-related, vaccine-related, or any of the supporting industries, refrigeration, transport, etc. So we're seeing a lot of activity in sort of that biotech, COVID-esque sector. Some symbols like DRAD, some mobile medical imaging, Cassava Sciences, which has a phase 2 trial going on, and a few others. So there are many, CODX is another. There are many stocks every day coming out with COVID-related news that, investors, that there is some real opportunity there.
Yeah, DRAD, small market cap, 13.4 million. So it's about a $2.81 stock. So that's where, you can have some play, right? And easily get involved. But get ready, potentially, to have maybe a strong stomach, too. All right, Dan Pipitone, co-founder Trade Zero America, on the phone from Brooklyn. Folks, we're just a few minutes away from the closing bell. We'll count you down right here on Bloomberg Radio.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. There you have it, sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange as we wrap up trading on this Tuesday, December 8th. Records for the S&P and a record for NASDAQ. First close ever above 3,700 on the S&P. This update brought to you by Witham. It's a forward-thinking advisory and accounting firm helping clients to be in a position of strength in the new reality of business. Learn about their innovative solutions by visiting witham.com. Let's get right to the numbers. We'll give you the why in a moment here. S&P up 10 to 3702, a gain of 0.3%, closing close to the best level of the day and bringing the year-to-date gain to 14.6%. NASDAQ also at a record, surging 62 points, up 0.5. Year-to-date up 40.2%, 10 in a row for the NASDAQ 100 index, higher again today, up by 0.3%. The Dow up 104, higher by 0.4%. Stocks rose as stimulus talks tempered concern about tougher restrictions amid a surge in coronavirus cases. The 10-year yield 0.91%, gold up 0.4% at 1870. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.2%, 45.66 a barrel. So on up day, again, records for the S&P 500 index and NASDAQ. Dan Pipitone is co-founder of Trade Zero America. And moments ago, right here on Bloomberg Business Week, he talked about the trades his customers are making, including cannabis stocks.
You know, we have Congress looking to take on marijuana, the Schedule 1 status, thought processes. You know, Biden administration is going to be a lot more lax, potentially the cannabis leaving Schedule 1. We've seen a lot of activity in the stocks. Tilray, CGC has been on fire lately. Again, all of these issues played strongly on both the long and short side.
And speaking of on fire, Stitch Fix shares surged today by 39.2%, better than expected fiscal first quarter results. Recapping equities rally, S&P at a record up 10, up 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Wild thing, think you move me.
I got a few moves I know you'll like.
Shaking all over.
Bloomberg Business Week. Movers and shakers.
Shaking, not stirring.
On Bloomberg Radio.
Yes, indeed. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week on this Tuesday. Carol Massar along with Tim Stenovic, and we are taking a look at a little bit of a deeper dive into the markets. Charlie giving us those closing numbers. So S&P 500, big picture, Tim. 293 names in the index higher today, 210 lower, 2 unchanged. If I look at the major industry groups in the S&P 500, there are 11. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 were higher. Energy, once again, energy is either at the bottom or the top. Well, it was at the top of the pack today, up almost 1.6%. Healthcare was up about 0.7%. Materials up about 0.6%. Bottom of the pack, utilities down 0.3%, and bottom of the pack, real estate down about 0.5%. So kind of a mixed day here. So and that, you know, but we did pretty much finish, as Charlie mentioned, I think just off our highs of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing to see another record day, at least intraday, for the NASDAQ, for the S&P 500. But I think investors at the same time are taking a step back and thinking about what they're going to see from Washington when it comes to some sort of stimulus package. I mean, that's the theme for the remainder of the year.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think there's expectations, fingers are crossed, that we will get something that will help. I also do think each day we get some more news on a vaccine, to see the UK starting to do vaccinations, getting more news on Pfizer, that we are able to kind of play out a timeline, right, of when we are all maybe going to get the vaccine. We hear it more increasingly from, you know, members of the medical community about when they get to see the vaccine and get to administer it to their teams, and then when we start to get it. And so you get to start to think about, okay, does 2021, do we at least maybe have half the year? Maybe that's a little bit more normal.
Fingers crossed. I mean,
right?
Can't come soon enough.
Yeah, exactly. So you were looking at some analyst research, right, that was talking about the retail environment. I am curious. I think it was about the retail environment, right? The holiday environment?
Yeah, because we're expecting earnings from GameStop today, and we're keeping an eye on those. And I was just looking into what analysts were saying and areas to watch. And commentary around Black Friday and how Black Friday sales were is something that I'm going to be eager to hear for. And then also the new gaming consoles that have been in really short supply. I mean, we saw them released a few weeks ago.
Because everybody's been buying them while they've been home. Right?
Everyone's been buying them when they're home. And then also the supply constraints that the supply chain has faced as the supply chain has been under pressure during the pandemic. How are they able to keep those in stock? I mean, you saw these things pop up on eBay for hundreds of dollars more just in the days since they were released. So what are they doing to keep them in stock?
Just taking a look at GameStop and just seeing where it is. Stock's up 178% this year, right? Which makes sense. And they're going to report earnings. Yeah, right? But listen, people were playing games. That's what they were doing in lockdown for their families, for their kids, for themselves. Chewy is another one that really was. It's on the Bloomberg 50. I recently caught up with the company's CEO, Sumit Singh. And it's up 173% here this year. But, I mean, people were buying stuff for their pets.
They were. And, you know, they call them pet parents at Chewy. Because people increasingly are treating their pets like their own children. And we saw that play out in the pandemic. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how they, you know, and they, like a lot of other retailers. And speaking of Chewy, I was going to say that they've been really increasingly, they are digital, but, you know, even kind of leaning more into it. Chewy coming out with their third quarter net sales, $1.78 billion, a little bit higher than what the street was forecasting. They were looking for $1.72 billion. Third quarter adjusted EBITDA, $5.5 million versus a loss of $9.69 million. So I just want to pull up Chewy here in the after hours and see what we're getting here. Stock is up about 3.5%. It's bouncing around, but it's up more than 3% here in the after hours.
That is a beat on the bottom line.
Yep. And GameStop also coming out now. Third quarter adjusted loss of 0.53 cents a share. 53 cents a share, versus an estimated loss of 85 cents a share. So that looks like it's a much smaller loss than what everybody was forecasting. And let me just do a quick check on what that's doing in the after hours. It is up about 1.5% as well.
So solid numbers from both of those companies. Back to Chewy, because we're also getting some more headlines across the Bloomberg right now. Net sales for the fourth quarter of the year, the company is seeing those come in at 1.94 to 1.96 billion, beating estimates from analysts that came to 1.78 billion.
Yeah, so this is certainly, pretty optimistic numbers there and raising its forecast, as you said. All right, you are listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up.
Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson.
Open up the door, it's Dave! Who? Dave!
Hey, Mr. Wilson! Hey, Mr. Wilson, let's bring in Dave Wilson for his stock of the day. What do you got, Dave?
I've got Liquidity Services, Carol. They operate what they call a reverse supply chain. The company has online marketplaces where companies and government agencies resell surplus items. Now, Liquidity Services was founded in 1999 as liquidation.com, a website that it still runs. The company went public in 2006. The ticker is LQDT. Liquidity Services shares set a record in May 2012 after a 3-year surge. All the gains were lost in the next 4 years, and the shares slid to a record low this past March. Liquidity Services has rebounded since then, and the rally accelerated in a big way after fiscal fourth quarter results came out today. The company's adjusted profit amounted to 23 cents a share. Analysts only expected 2 cents on average, based on the Bloomberg survey. Revenue also beat estimates, largely because of record growth at the company's government surplus site, govdeals.com. Liquidity Services rose to a 6-year high in response to results, but that was just the start. The shares closed with a gain of 41.5%, and that was the biggest ever.
Wow, so definitely makes a good explanation as to why it was moving around, Dave.
Oh, yeah, no question. I mean, if you're a government agency at this point, you're looking for money wherever you can find it because of how tax revenues have come down because of the coronavirus. And no doubt a whole lot of companies are in the same position, and that means more business for Liquidity Services.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting company. We don't talk about that a lot. Government surplus, right?
No.
Yeah.
6-year high.
Yeah, exactly.
Government surplus and corporate surplus, too.
All right, good to know. Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Dave Wilson, our Bloomberg News stocks editor with his stock of the day. I'm just kind of bringing up, Chewy's now up about 4.5% here in the after hours. GameStop, though, is now down about 5, 6, 7%.
Good year for both of those companies.
Yeah, exactly. And so we'll dig a little bit deeper as investors, though, their initial reaction, positive on Chewy, but not so in GameStop. Maybe there's some other numbers that have been trickling through. We'll keep an eye on that. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
We're done for Tuesday.
I will see you tomorrow.
We'll see you back here on Wednesday. All right, now over to World and National News headlines, and let's check in with Ed Baxter. Hey, Ed.
All right. Hi, Carol. Connecticut now has the highest per capita COVID case rate in the nation. That's per capita as the nation passes 15 million mark. New York City telling restaurants to expect curbs in a matter of days if rates don't stabilize in the city. UK rolls out the first Pfizer vaccination.
It's amazing to see this tremendous shot in the arm for the entire nation.
And Prime Minister Boris Johnson is on his way to Brussels, by the way, for a Brexit push. Vaccines in the U.S., well, President-elect Joe Biden says 100 million doses in the first 100 days of his administration.
We did not get into this mess quickly. We're not going to get out of it quickly. It's going to take some time. But I'm absolutely convinced that in 100 days we can change the course of the disease and change life in America for the better.
And the head of the Trump administration's warp speed seems to be confirming on ABC that the U.S. did miss the opportunity to buy more vaccine this past summer.
Once the vaccine's performance becomes known, is the right time, given the strategy we've taken, to go and order more vaccine doses, which we may be doing.
Yeah, but President Trump now says he'll sign an executive order keeping the vaccine in the U.S., this even though international contracts have been signed. And has Joe Biden reached the goal of making the deadline for today's to ratify the election, meaning there's little turning back? But Donald Trump is drawing down to this.
Whether it's a legislator or legislatures, or whether it's a justice of the Supreme Court or a number of justices of the Supreme Court, let's see if they have the courage to do what everybody in this country knows is right.
Does not specify as everybody and does not specify what is right. I'm Ed Baxter in San Francisco.
All right, Ed Baxter in San Francisco. Thank you so much. Carol Masser in New York, along with Charlie Pellet of Bloomberg News, also in New York. This story caught our attention earlier this morning. Mark Gurman covers all things Apple. He's our Apple guru. He put a story out on the Bloomberg about Apple launching a series of headphones. We all have the earbuds, right? But this is a different beast,
Exactly.
Charlie.
And as I saw these headphones, there's a picture in Mark's story, but what came to mind was number one, nice. Number two, expensive. Number three, they look awesome. And number four, they are technically unbelievable. But the price tag on these headphones, maybe if you're paying for it with Masser money, that's one thing. But we're talking $550. Yes, it includes wireless pairing, noise cancellation, but $550 for headphones?
All Masser money goes towards education right now. That's what it goes towards. But yeah, listen, they're going into a market where we see a lot of pricey headphones, right? If I think about Beats or Bose or, you name it. What's interesting, I do like their timing. They're going to go on sale. They did start going on sale today, and I guess start arriving into people's hands December 15th, but it's kind of, just in time for the holiday season.
Indeed. And it's interesting, too, because just in terms of the genesis of all of this, Apple recently stopped selling rival headphones and speakers from the likes of Bose and Sonos in September, and that clears the way for them to come out with their own line of Apple-branded headphones, and they are truly gorgeous-looking headphones.
Yeah, listen, and it's interesting. They apparently work with Siri, so that's good to know. They also have a physical side control called the Digital Crown, which I just like that. It's the same mechanism on the Apple Watch to control music playback. They come in several colors: space gray, silver, blue, green, and pink, Charlie.
That's right, and on a day when technology shares are rallying, Apple up 0.5%, bringing its year-to-date gain to 69.4%.
And let's not forget, right? Apple acquired Beats by Dre's headphone division, right? So now they're actually competing with their own other set of headphones. God, technology. Strange bedfellows, that's for sure. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. After hours, we did hear from GameStop. GameStop shares falling on a third quarter sales miss. The CEO does see sales growth in the fourth quarter. So again, after earnings, GameStop shares are trading lower. Stocks at a record as stimulus talks temper concern about tougher restrictions amid a surge in coronavirus cases. S&P at a record, up 10 to 3702, a gain of 0.3%. The Dow up 104, up 0.4%. NASDAQ up 62, a gain there of 0.5%. 10-year yield 0.91%. We've got gold up 0.5%, 1871 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude a retreat today, down 0.2%, 45.66 a barrel. Again, records on Wall Street for both the S&P and NASDAQ. S&P closing above 3,700. NASDAQ 100 index made it 10 in a row. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
If you were going to say it was going to be a record year time and time again a few months ago, Charlie, I would never believed it.
You think of where we were back earlier this year at the depths, and even so, we saw the Dow lagging everything else. The Dow up 5.7%, S&P up 14.6%, NASDAQ up 40.2%. More than you wanted to know, but I love to share.
No, love all that data and that information. All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. So speaking of superlatives, there's been a lot for Tesla this year. Today, Tesla also saying it's going to bring a huge war chest of cash to go with its eye-popping market valuation when it joins the S&P 500 index later on this month. The electric vehicle maker's latest trip to the capital markets, check this out, raising as much as $5 billion, meaning it will have raised a total of $12 billion this year alone, or more cash than is held by 88% of the companies in the S&P 500, including some of those big, well-known companies, Pfizer, AT&T, and Caterpillar. So let's find out what Tesla is up to. Tesla, by the way, among our most read on the Bloomberg today. That story on Tesla's latest cash raise, written by Bloomberg Technology Reporter and our go-to on Tesla, all things Elon Musk. Dana Hull with us back from San Francisco. Dana, I don't know how you keep up with the company, the individual, because it is nonstop. So what is this cash raise all for? Is he just kind of planning for 2021?
Well, I think the point is that, why not? I mean, there's the shares are flying high, so there's very little dilution. And in an interview today with the Wall Street Journal, Musk said that it's nice to have a war chest and that this will help them retire their debt more quickly. So it sounded like they didn't need to raise the money, but I mean, when your shares are at the height that they are, and when you have a market that's willing to fund you, you might as well go for it.
Sounds like Elon Musk being very, very much like a CEO, very C-suite speak, isn't it?
Yep.
Well, so
yeah, I mean, I think in the past the question about Tesla was always like, gosh, they need to raise money. Their cash position is so bad, but they have a lot of cash on hand. And I think this is just more of an insurance policy. And again, you can raise cash without diluting your existing shareholders.
Right. It's smart. I do wonder what you are anticipating for Elon Musk in 2021 after what's been a pretty remarkable year of 2020 for him.
Yeah, I think that, 2021 is very interesting. Musk said today that he has moved to Texas, where he is going to be focusing on two big projects. SpaceX has its new Starship vehicle, which is the vehicle that the company hopes will eventually transport people to Mars. They're doing a lot of testing, a lot of hop tests coming up. And the other big project is, Tesla is building a brand new factory in Austin for the Cybertruck and the Model Y. They also have plans to build batteries there. So Texas is taking up more of his time, and it sounds like he's relocated there, to be able to focus on that. So you're going to see him in Texas a lot, and I think that what's happening with SpaceX is incredibly interesting. I mean, we tend to focus on Tesla because that's the publicly traded company, and it makes a consumer-facing product. But remember, SpaceX is now rolling out a consumer-facing project with Starlink, which is their effort to bring high-speed broadband internet to people. And early reviews from the people who are part of the Starlink beta program are very positive. So I think you're just going to see a lot more interest in Starlink going forward.
Was Texas a surprise? I mean, as you said, he was building that factory there in Texas. But was this part of the long-term strategy and plan that he would have a significant presence there?
It's not a surprise. surprise to me personally. I have to say. I mean, if you follow his corporate jet, if you follow his private jet, he's been spending.
Dana, I don't follow his corporate jet. I'm just going to put it out there. But you do. Go ahead.
He's been spending an increasing amount of time in Texas, and obviously the coronavirus has made it possible for people to be more remote and more mobile than ever before. He's always been a highly mobile CEO, but the coronavirus shutdown orders in California earlier this year, he made no bones about being upset about that. And Texas has no personal income tax, which, when you're the second wealthiest person in the world, is probably important to you.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. Hey, I keep wondering, and since you know this world so well, I keep waiting for like the global automakers to kind of catch up to Elon Musk in terms of offerings, but I still feel like it just isn't quite happening. Or is it? Tell me how you're seeing it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that what's remarkable is that the automakers allowed Tesla to have so much of a runway ahead of them. And I think it was a chicken and the egg thing where people were like, well, is there really a market for electric vehicles beyond rich people? We don't want to make the investment in EVs until we're clear that there's a market. And everyone kept kind of waiting in the wings, watching, like, is Tesla going to make it or are they going to crater? And then Tesla has basically made it, and then all of a sudden now you're seeing all the other OEMs are like, okay, this is a real market. So like GM is now announcing, billions of dollars in investment, and everyone is kind of hurrying along their timelines. But Tesla is in the pole position, no question about it.
Hey, one last question. With all this money, this is a man who has his hands in so many different pots. You mentioned SpaceX. There's Hyperloop. There's obviously Tesla. Is there anything new that's maybe on his horizon? Maybe some other places his jet's been going that might give you an indication that anything else he might be pursuing come next year? Just got about 40 seconds here.
I mean, Neuralink, his brain machine interface company. I mean, that's another part of his growing empire. He's like an octopus with many tentacles. So it's super interesting to see if Neuralink is going to potentially hire more people in the Austin area as well.
All right. Well, good stuff as always. Dana, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Dana Hull, technology reporter at Bloomberg News, on the phone from San Francisco. I said her story on the Bloomberg, among our most read, Tesla raising up to $5 billion in a third offering this year. So certainly something that we've watched on this Tuesday. So for those of you listening in New York and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week, we're going to continue. If you're listening on Bloomberg 99.1 in D.C., Sound On with Kevin Cirilli is coming up next. Coming up next, we've got a great all-star lineup, including one of the analysts. He's a go-to, has been for decades, on telecom, cable, and satellite. We're going to check in with Craig Moffett. That's coming up right here on Bloomberg Radio.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Yeah, you are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Masser in Bloomberg headquarters here in New York City. And we're going to catch up with Craig Moffett. He's back with us. Looking forward to this over at MoffittNathanson. He's followed telecom, cable, satellite space for a long, long time. You got to love when he sends a research report over that says AT&T in U.S. theaters, Suicide Squad, ? We're going to talk about that and so much more in just a moment. Let's get back, though, to your top business stories, some of the news after the close. Here is Charlie Pellet.
Thank you very much. Moffett Talks. People listen. AT&T shares up by 4%. He's going to be talking about Disney and Netflix as well. Disney, by the way, little change today. Netflix had a down day, dropping 0.6%. U.S. stocks at a record. Stimulus talks tempering concern about tougher restrictions amid a surge in coronavirus cases. S&P up 10, a gain there of 0.3%. The Dow up 104, up 0.4. NASDAQ up 62, up 0.5. Both the S&P, NASDAQ at records. NASDAQ 100 index 10 in a row. S&P closing above 3,700 at 3,702. 10-year yield 0.91%. Gold up 0.5%, 1871 the ounce, and a retreat for crude. West Texas Intermediate down 0.6%, 45.05 a barrel on WTI. Lots of after the bell news. Another sale at Uber Technologies, selling off its flying taxi division to Joby Aviation and investing in the startup, marking the second time this week that Uber has abandoned a side project as it aims to turn a quarterly profit next year. After the bell, we heard from pet food retailer Chewy, boosting its net sales forecast for the full year. That guidance beating the average analyst estimate. Shares are trading higher, up by about 2% after hours. GameStop tumbling after reporting a bigger plunge in third quarter sales than analysts projected, sparking concern about the retail chain's comeback efforts. It is down now by about 7%. So again, a record on Wall Street. Stimulus talks tempering concern about tougher restrictions. Emily Rowland is co-chief investment strategist at JH Investments.
The prevailing narrative today is that demand just comes roaring back once you see this vaccine becoming widely available. And the challenge is that a lot of that demand's already been pulled forward.
American Express says it will focus on refreshing many of its most popular credit cards next year to help retain fee-paying customers and persuade more of them to upgrade. American Express shares down today by 0.3%. And GE has poured $4 billion into repairing its balance sheet, furthering steps to whittle down a pension liability that has been a thorn in CEO Larry Culp's turnaround efforts. GE up today by 0.9%. Recapping, S&P at a record, up 10, up 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It is indeed. All right, Charlie, thank you so much for that update. Well, he's a star analyst when it comes to telecom, cable, and satellite space. He's watched it grow, evolve, and really be challenged over the years. And as someone described on our morning call as we were setting our lineup, he is definitely a legend. Named the #1 analyst by Institutional Investor magazine year after year, rated #1 in the telecom space by our own Bloomberg Markets. And his vantage point is really great because he understands the industry. He's been an analyst, he's covered it, but he's also seen it from the inside as the founder and CEO of the e-commerce business over at Sotheby's. So Craig Moffett is back, founding partner, senior analyst at MoffettNathanson, back with us on the phone in New York City. So good to have you back. How are you? What's changed since we last talked roughly about a month or so ago?
Yeah, thank you, Carol. Nice to be back.
Yeah.
Well, I think the big news really is the big announcement yesterday from AT&T, which about bringing movies in so-called day and date, or the same day that they bring them to movie theaters, bringing them to HBO Max, and that is really an extraordinary development. It has implications for the exhibitors, that is the movie theaters. It has implications for AT&T itself. And I think, as you saw with a lot of the blowback today, it has a big implications for the actors and artists and directors, which I think was maybe underappreciated yesterday. And boy, oh boy, did they hear an earful today from how angry some of their stakeholders are.
Got a million questions. So do you think this is a 2021 thing or just a short-term thing, or do you think this is something that becomes part of how it happens longer term and maybe forever?
Well, it puts them in a difficult position because Jason Kilar, who formerly of Hulu and the person who put himself out front in this decision, now running Warner Media, made it very clear that this is a decision about customers and that the customers want movies day and date. It's what they've always wanted. And I don't think anybody would argue with that. Customers would love to have movies day and date. The problem is once you say that, it's a little hard to put the genie back in the bottle and then say, what, in 2022, we no longer want to put customers first?
Yeah.
And so it feels like, not just to me, but I think to most people, as if this is going to become an expectation, and the implications of that, again, are just enormous.
Well, listen, you just get into the weeds with all of this, and you really break it down that, when somebody creates a piece of content, a major film or something, the theaters is just one level, right? But there's so many other levels, and you go through the pay windows, right? And you say that often when it does its theatrical release, it doesn't necessarily make money there, but it's the later windows. Like you talk about the pay one window, like an HBO. That's where it starts to maybe, be at least be in the green on some kind of movie.
And remember, we're not just talking about AT&T and Warner Media themselves. We're also talking about directors and actors who have participation deals. So Christopher Nolan today, a critically important director to Warner Media, is irate, and as are lots of these directors. So, in Legendary Entertainment, which was offered hundreds of millions of dollars for King Kong versus Godzilla to go direct to Netflix, took the deal to Warner Brothers instead, and then got blindsided and wasn't told in advance, from what we read today, that, oh, by the way, we're taking your movie out of movie theaters, or at least we're going to be making it available at no extra charge on HBO same day.
Right.
If you're a director and you're or an investor in one of those films, and you've got hundreds of millions of dollars riding on the performance at the box office based on your contract, your head's going to explode. And from what we understand, they were not told in advance in order to keep secrecy. So when they did this with Wonder Woman, which was, you may recall, Wonder Woman was the first movie, and that was done purely as a one-off. It was single film with no expectations of any others to follow. Was moved directly to HBO Max in a similar model. They ended up having to pay each of Gal Gadot, the star, and the director, $10 million each in order to sort of satisfy them that they weren't giving up too much in terms of their residuals.
Craig, sit tight for a second. I have to break in because we've got to do a little bit of news, but we're going to come back to you in just a moment. We're going to come back to Craig Moffett. In the meantime, we do have to go to Ed Baxter for a check on world and national news. Hey, Ed.
All right, Carol, thank you. Ahead of Operation Warp Speed, Dr. Moncef Slaoui on ABC has confirmed the Trump administration missed the opportunity to buy more Pfizer vaccine this past summer.
If somebody came to us and said, let's buy more of this vaccine or that vaccine, no one reasonably would buy more from any one of those vaccines because we didn't know which one would work and which one may be better than the other.
Now, the president, though, at the White House event today said that he'd signed an executive order to keep the already contracted vaccine in the U.S. in the first place.
Over the next few months, the numbers should skyrocket downward.
Skyrocket downward. He probably meant plummet. And as President-elect Joe Biden introduces his health team, a familiar voice.
We have got a lot of hard and demanding work to do in the next year. But as we have done during previous crises, I also know we can get through this pandemic together as a nation.
Dr. Anthony Fauci pleased to be on the Biden team.
Masking, vaccinations, opening schools. These are the three key goals for my first 100 days. But we'll still have much to do in the year ahead. And sadly, much difficulty as well.
Now, this case, as the nation passes a 15 million case mark, Texas Attorney General has asked the Supreme Court to block states from selecting electors. Republicans on the congressional panel planning the inauguration have blocked a resolution saying they were preparing for the swearing in of Joe Biden, saying it hasn't been decided yet. And vaccinations have started in the UK. The Prime Minister is headed to Brussels for Brexit talks. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Ed Baxter, thank you so much. Just want to mention a headline crossing the Bloomberg. The Supreme Court rejecting a bid to nullify President-elect Joe Biden's Pennsylvania win. So we continue to see some of the last trickling ins of some of those legal challenges. So again, the Supreme Court rejecting a bid to nullify Joe Biden's Pennsylvania win, obviously reference to the presidential election. All right, Carol Masser here with Charlie Pellet of Bloomberg News. Charlie, this story caught our attention. It has to do with Bill Gates, and he has been out there praising India's policies for financial innovation and inclusion, saying his philanthropic foundation is working with some other countries to roll out open source technologies modeled on India's implementation. So, you know, we see this in emerging markets, right? When it comes to technology, innovation kind of has to happen because there just isn't the infrastructure and support that we see in a lot of the developed world.
Indeed, fast forward seems to be the only way to go. India has built an ambitious platform for universal identification and digital payments, including the world's largest biometric database, along with a system for sending rupees between any bank or smartphone app. Gates says those policies have drastically reduced the cost and friction of distributing aid to the poor, especially in the pandemic. His remarks, by the way, came at the Singapore FinTech Festival, saying, quote, if people are going to study one country right now other than China, I'd say they should look at India.
Well, it's fascinating, right? And we've seen this with Africa, too, certainly when it comes to FinTech. And these platforms and use of mobile phones have given individuals throughout Africa certainly an identity. So another emerging market. What's interesting is, though, India mandates that companies use its platform so that payments can be sent easily, its UPI platform, so payments can be sent easily among all services. So that includes anything from Facebook, Amazon, Walmart, and some others. But this whole idea of open source technologies allows a lot of innovation and development to happen, but it also provides for an easier access.
Fascinating story.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. So appreciate it. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser, we're going to get back to Craig Moffett at MoffittNathanson in just a moment, right here on Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. GameStop shares plunging on a third quarter sales miss. The CEO sees sales growth in the fourth quarter, but right now, shares of GameStop, they are down by 12%. A record day on Wall Street amid stimulus discussions. The S&P up 10 points, higher by 0.3%, closing at 3702. First time that has happened above the 3,700 threshold. NASDAQ up 62 points today, up by 0.5%. NASDAQ 100 index 10 days of gains in a row, up today by 0.3. The Dow up 104, higher by 0.4%. 10-year yield 0.92%. Gold up by $8 today, up 0.5%. Gold 18.71 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude a retreat there, down 0.6%. 45.50 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. I want to get right back to Craig Moffett, founding partner and senior analyst at MoffettNathanson, back with us on the phone in New York City. Craig, my apologies, I had to cut you off because the computers were going to cut us off. But you were talking about what happened with Wonder Woman and what people are now calling the Wonder Woman money. You know, this comes down to how people are paid, right? Whether it's directors, actors, all of the people involved in getting a movie to the theater. It kind of comes down to that, right? The upfront money versus maybe the money that comes later after ticket sales.
That's right. And the reason this is all so important is, look, at the end of the day, AT&T is a phone company. Mm-hmm. And culturally, you always have to wonder how well is a phone company going to adapt to what is essentially a creative business. And the core competence of Warner Brothers Studio and what has made it such a special place for the last 93 years is that it has wonderful relationships with creative talent. And so I want to make sure your listeners sort of appreciate how important it is for a studio to make sure that they cultivate and maintain those relationships. And they clearly have some damage control to do here because of the way this was done. So separate and apart from whether or not it was a good strategic decision, the execution, I think, raises some questions about did they care for the talent and the creative partners properly in a way that's going to preserve the specialness of what Warner Brothers has always been.
Right, and as you rightfully say, and as people have written about that, Warner Brothers was known as a place that really kind of took care of its talent, and so to see this is really kind of disconcerting. So Craig, do we figure this out? Do we figure out the pay issues? Do we figure out the transparency? And do contracts change going forward? As you said, once the genie's out of the bottle for customers, are customers going to demand more of it be released directly to home, through various services or streaming services versus the theater? Does the theater go away in your view?
Well, I don't know that the theater goes away, but you can't pretend that this is anything other than bad news for the exhibitors. And yeah. You do have to. Now, look, the exhibitors, under normal circumstances, would have said, we will simply boycott Warner Brothers movies and we will only do business with others, and they would have had at least some leverage. They are so badly damaged by the COVID crisis and are barely hanging on for dear life. And so they really don't have a lot of negotiating leverage here, and that also won't help relationships. But they clearly are in a very difficult position. So you wonder what the play will be. I do think long term, this is the beginning of what's going to have to be the elimination of a lot of screens. There will still be the experience of going out and enjoying a movie, but the economics just aren't going to support the number of screens we have as this transition starts to happen.
And you did.
And by the way, it may have implications overseas too, because
that's huge.
You put a movie onto HBO Max, you can guarantee that within 5 minutes after it ends, there are going to be digital copies all over the web, and it's going to be pirated, and therefore it's going to impact movie theater viewership in Asia and in South America and in Europe.
And I should put out, you did put a sell rating, right, on AT&T, is that correct?
Yeah, well, I've had one for a long time. It's not because of this. It's because of a whole series of structural problems at AT&T and the challenge that they have in supporting the dividend.
All right, good to know. So, hey, one thing I want to ask you, because we talked about it last time you were on, and that was about 5G. I have not bought my phone, but the rest of my family has. I did get off air, and I'm like, John, my husband, did you know? So we had a long conversation. But tell me, you guys did a big summit, a day-long summit, I think back in November. So tell me about what you guys looked into and what kind of were the major takeaways, Craig.
Well, I think one of the things that we talked about last time and that I think was reinforced at our summit from all of the speakers is that 5G in the United States is still not quite ready for prime time. We have a version of 5G that has reasonably good coverage but not terribly good speeds, and it's going to take a little while. T-Mobile is really best positioned, but one of the things that was striking, to come back to AT&T, is how much at our summit we heard from T-Mobile about how they were going to compete with Verizon, and Verizon how they're going to compete with T-Mobile, and AT&T almost doesn't come up in the conversation. AT&T is I think in a much more challenging position for 5G, in part because of an auction that just started today. The C-band auction, as it's called, that started at the FCC today, is a critical input for 5G. Most of the rest of the world already has what's so-called C-band spectrum. The U.S., it's just coming to market now, and it looks for all the world like Verizon is best positioned to get it. That will give them an offering that's going to be competitive against T-Mobile. But you really wonder whether AT&T has the money to be able to participate in the auction because their balance sheet is so weak that it's just not clear that the rating agencies will allow them to spend the money that they need without having to cut the dividend. So it puts them in a very tough spot.
That stayed with me from our last conversation about how AT&T was its hands were tied to some extent, that it didn't necessarily have the cash needed to be, to participate in these auctions. And I do wonder, that's one of those things that longer term, what kind of impact that will have.
Yeah, if they don't, these are telecom businesses are really long cycle businesses. Right. These are not businesses where 2 years later you move from being behind to being ahead and back again. These are businesses where cycles are 10 years long or even 20 years long. And so AT&T's network right now is pretty competitive. It's actually as good relative to Verizon as any time that I can recall in the last 20 years. But you really wonder if they don't get the spectrum, with no more spectrum in the pipeline like this behind it, whether they could be disadvantaged for a decade or more if they don't get it. On the other hand, if they do, their leverage ratio would be so high that they're already teetering on the knife edge of dividend sustainability. That would arguably make it even worse. And so there may not be any good outcomes.
Yeah, which makes it just even trickier going forward. When it comes to 5G, just remind our audience, just got about 30 seconds left here. So are you saying that ultimately Verizon, you think, is the best positioned here?
No, I think T-Mobile is the best positioned, probably. Their spectrum position is a bit better, and they come in. What's nice about T-Mobile is they're the cheapest service by virtue of once upon a time having a subpar network. As their network now has gotten to parity, and I think in 5G will actually be the best in class, having the lowest prices and the best service is a pretty powerful combination to drive not only market share gains but also margin enhancement. So I'm still quite excited about T-Mobile, even though the stock's had a very good run.
All right, great to check in with you. Thank you so much. And really what's going on in terms of theaters and movie releases, that is just something we've all got to take a closer look at and follow. I know the markets have certainly been reacting. Craig Moffett, thank you so much. Have a great holiday. Founding partner, senior analyst over at MoffettNathanson. He really is a go-to when it comes to telecom, understanding these companies, the cable space as well. So great to check in with him again on this Tuesday. Some headlines crossing with Jamie Dimon, looking for M&A deals in adjacent businesses, and he said banks should be allowed to fail. So we'll break down some more of those headlines crossing the Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.